Okay, it's November 22nd, 2023. 60 years ago, John F. Kennedy was murdered in Dallas, Texas. I was born the following year. So because of the nature of his death, the charismatic character he was, and the shenanigans that have continued to this very day, it's still an incident that resonates today with my generation anyway, which I've just been discussing with Jace, if not so much the younger generation. So I don't remember when I first became aware of the John F. Kennedy assassination. To be honest, my first recollection of the Kennedys is the Bobby Kennedy assassination in Los Angeles. So I can remember as a 4 or 5-year-old seeing the images from the pantry on ITV. I think there was a program called This Weekend with Peter J or something like that on Sunday lunchtimes it was. And I can remember seeing those images, but I wasn't really aware of the John F. Kennedy assassination until, I guess it must have been junior school in the early 70s. And as far as I was concerned, Lee Harvey Oswald had murdered him. That was it. There was nothing more to think about. Then I think the Zapruder film was televised on Geraldo in 1975. But I don't think it was until the late 70s that I became aware that there might have been something more sinister behind the John F. Kennedy assassination. It might even have been your book, Jace, that I read. Was it did you have the Summers book, the Anthony Summers book? So
did I ever get it back?
Actually, I think before that I probably had seen The Man Who Killed the Kennedys. That was Anthony Summers again, wasn't it? I think that was before, probably late 70s. I can't remember when. So I think actually I saw the documentaries about the Kennedy assassination probably late 70s, and then I read your book maybe a decade later. I can't remember exactly. So and then of course the Oliver Stone film came out. That must have been in the 90s. Was it in the 90s? And then that really got me more interested in it. And of course with the development of the internet and so on, a lot more information has become more accessible. So I've really got into it a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. So like John Motson or Michael Parkinson, it's been a constant throughout my life, so it's just something I have an attachment to. How about your history with the JFK assassination, Jace?
Well, again, like you, I don't really remember the first time I became aware of it, but I know it was as a kid. I mean, I was born 4 years after, in 1967, which was again a year before. I think it was a year before Bobby Kennedy, so I don't really remember that either.
Yeah.
But I probably became aware that my grandparents first talking about it when the whole Edward Kennedy scandal with Chappaquiddick and Mary Jo Kopechne and everything else. I think I don't even know when that was, but I think I became aware then of the sort of the Kennedy family.
I'm not sure. I think that could have been around was it around the time of the Bobby assassination? Around that time, maybe?
No, I think it was a little bit after that, because I think at that time as well, I think Ted Kennedy was he was senator or he was about to run for president himself or
Yeah.
whatever, and then all of a sudden that all happens, and that puts the end to that, you know.
Yeah.
I do remember my granddad sort of saying that, you know, that family is cursed and all that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
I think that was probably what sort of pricked my curiosity, I suppose. But like you know, growing up with school and everything, it was just accepted that, you know, the president in 1963 was assassinated, and it was Lee Harvey Oswald that shot him, and that was it, done and dusted, it's in the books, sort of thing. But then I started to look at stuff as I got older, and then, as you say, I was actually going to America, and in the airport I bought that book by Annie Summers, and I think it was called The Kennedy Conspiracy, wasn't it? I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember, to be honest.
Yeah, because he'd previously written a book about Marilyn Monroe, and obviously there was the connection with Marilyn Monroe and Kennedy and that, and I'd read that before, and I thought, oh, this will be a good book to read, and I thought I was absolutely, well, I think I read for every minute of that flight, you know, and that book was just like a real eye-opener, much as, yeah, there are so many things that don't add up, there are so many things that, you know, nobody's really answered the question, and the more I was into it, the more I thought, well, you know, why would they cover up such a thing? Why would they put so many sort of falsehoods, so many lies? Why would the autopsy be so, you know, for want of a better phrase, half-assed, and amateur more than anything else? And then you got the whole Warren Commission thing, which kind of just, it's just one big dossier of lies and fabrication at the end of the day, which was sold to the American people.
Yeah, I've never even read the Warren report. I think you have, but I haven't. Yeah.
And then, you know, that was just sold to the American people as like, well, this is it. It's in a volume or hundreds of volumes, and that's it. Done, right? Done, dusted. And then I read long before the Oliver Stone, I read the book by Jim Garrison, on the trail of the assassins. So, and then, you know, you're thinking, well, this is the guy that's brought so far the only sort of trial to anyone or about anyone other than Lee Oswald. Obviously, we know he didn't go to trial, but, you know, trial by proxy kind of thing, right? So yeah, it was an eye opener, real eye opener. And when obviously Oliver Stone decided he was going to do JFK based on that Jim Garrison book,
yeah,
obviously it was a watch, and I must have watched it 100 times now. And I know, you know, well, you know, from my background about being in the industry and stuff, I know that stuff gets dramatized, and I know that stuff gets a little bit, you know, stretched to, you know, appease the cinema going public and all the rest of it. But I mean, again, recently watched Oliver Stone revisiting that sort of, I don't know, 35 years later or something like that. Yeah. 30 years later, I don't know.
Was it 1994?
It's interesting to hear in the.
Was it 1994 that JFK?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It was interesting to sort of hear him again talking about it, and the fact that, you know, since he made that film, some things have come to light which are, you know, sort of blown some of the stuff that he put in that film out of the water a little bit. So, but again, you know, more questions of reason that wasn't even addressed in that film. So, yeah, for me, it's been a bit of a, like you, it's kind of always been there. And I do remember my parents were saying that, you know, everybody remembers where they were when they first heard that assassination had happened. Same way, I guess, that our generation will know exactly what they were doing when 9/11 happened and all that kind of stuff. You know, there are very few moments in history where the world stops, right? And I think obviously the Kennedy assassination was one of those. Yeah, so it's but for me, you know, I consider myself to be a sensible, rational, normal human being. I'm not a crackpot. I'm not not conspiracy theorists, although there are a couple of conspiracies that I am really into, such as the moon landing and stuff. But I think for me, it's like, unless I can see tangible proof, I'm never going to believe it. And all I've seen throughout everything I've looked at with the whole JFK thing, that everything's got a question hanging over it. Everything, every aspect of it. There's a yeah, but what if, or well, was that, or who said this? Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Everything has a question attached to it. And I'm thinking, well, we're 60 years later and we still haven't got the answers. And when we have had the answers, those answers raise more questions.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, about all the motives behind everything. Like, if it was a random killing by a lone nut gunman, what was the motive? What was the motive? What was the motive for one singular person doing that? What was the motive? The other things I've looked at is if it was a conspiracy, and whether it was plus another or others, that would have to be really, really thoroughly planned out, and for nobody to be coming forward in all of those 60 years and saying, well, actually, no, this is what happened, right? And again, if it was an orchestrated hit, for want of a better word, either by the CIA or the mafia or whoever, right? Again, it would have to be planned to the nth degree over a long period of time. But then they're kind of just waiting for a snapshot window where they could do it. Or was it a snapshot window, or was that whole thing planned so that they could be in that particular spot at that particular time in order to give them a clear shot and blah, 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 and all the rest of it? And then I asked the question as well, who benefited? Who benefited from it? So if you look at, if it was a lone gunman, who benefited from that? Right? Yeah. If it was a mob hit or a constructed coup de grace, whatever you want to call it, who benefits? And the only people that really don't benefit from the whole thing is the American public, and the rest of the world, because it's like we need to know. The human nature is, you need to know the answers to questions. That is basic human nature. If you're not sure of an answer, you want to go out, you want to find the answer, you want to find proof. Otherwise, we'd have total anarchy worldwide. Some might argue that we have got anarchy worldwide, but there would be no law and order. There would be no right and wrong. There would be nothing. If you didn't know any of that, there would be nothing. And we need that as a human race. We need that structure. We need that foundation in order to survive. And it's one of the biggest, in my opinion, it's one of the biggest lies that the human race will ever be told.
Oh yeah,
and
I
don't suppose we'll ever know.
In recent history, I would say.
I don't suppose we'll ever know the truth. We'll ever know.
Yeah, regarding that point you made about being tantalized, not quite knowing. I think James Douglas, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, he was talking about plausible deniability. So you're sort of in this corridor of uncertainty where you can't really prove it, and the people you think did something, they can plausibly deny it, even though they're lying. And also, I think Joseph Miltier, he's the guy that was recorded saying JFK was going to be hit in Dallas, or did he say Dallas? He said he was going to be hit from a window high up in a high-rise.
No, he did. He did predict Dallas. He did predict Dallas.
Yeah. But when
did he predict it, or did he know?
Yeah, well, he knew. Yeah, but I think he also said, he specified that the people who did it it wasn't going to be an action on a step-by-step action. It was just going to be ready to go at any moment and adapt to the situation. He said that. So I think there are a few hints that maybe that's the way they acted, but maybe for part of the operation, not necessarily all of it. So
well, I mean, I would think. Sorry, yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, did you want to add to that, Jace, or we can move on to? Yeah, did you want to add?
No, I was just going to say, just wanted to add that, you know, going back to what I used to think about, you know, whether it was a lone gunman or whether it was an orchestrated hit. For me, either way, it would have to be planned to the nth degree, right? Now, if it was a lone gunman, it's too sitting up in a book depository on the 3rd floor or wherever it was.
Yeah.
Too much risk of failure, right?
Yeah.
If you're a lone nut, say, or just somebody that just is hell bent on assassinating somebody, surely to goodness, you're going to put yourself in a situation where, okay, you know in the back of your head you're going to get caught for it, or you're going to get shot for doing it yourself, or whatever. So you know you ain't getting away with it, right? Because you're assassinating one of probably the 2 most important people on the planet at that particular point in history, right? You ain't going to get away with it if you're a lone gunman, and you'd know that. You would know that going into that. So therefore, you're going to put yourself in a situation where you ain't going to miss, right? Because if you do miss, you ain't going to achieve your objective, and you're still going to get shot anyway, right?
Yeah,
that's the way I consider it. That's the way I look at it. If it was me in that situation, I want to get as close to as possible my target, so there would be less risk of missing or fouling up or whatever. I wouldn't myself miles up in a building with the hope of getting the best shot ever in history.
Yeah.
Right? I just wouldn't do it. If it was orchestrated by a mob or whatever, again, massive risk of failure. So you go to all of that planning, and then you try to stick your gunman up on the 3rd floor book depository where there's there's shit in the way and all the rest of it. And even if the car had gone a little quicker or even a little bit slower, or change speed at that particular point where he cracks off the rifle, right? Or veered to the left or to the right, or what? So many randoms that could have happened, or even somebody like running out with a flag or something saying, "Hello, Mr. President," right at the point he's going to fire that gun. So many opportunities to foul up. So what you're doing then, if you're orchestrating that, you're going to make sure that you haven't got one gunman. You're going to make sure you've various different opportunities and sites and whatever, so that if one fails, the other one can do it. And I think that's exactly what happened. But that's just my theory on it.
Yeah, the other question about that is, did the person or people who did it want to get away, or were they quite happy to be caught? So it seems clear to me that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't want to get caught. So if he didn't want to get caught and he was meant to be shooting from the 6th floor, like you were saying, I mean, that doesn't seem like a very logical place to shoot from. It also,
I mean, sorry, go on.
I'm not a rifle shooter or anything, but also just that angle, from the angle of the depository and the angle of the road, it seems counterintuitive to me that you would kind of shoot like that. I think you'd be shooting like that. Not like,
and I've always said
that's kind of like shooting inside. I'm not an expert, I don't know. So somebody will probably say I'm wrong, but it just seems to me like inside out and not very relaxed way to try and shoot.
The whole thing's inside out, and they also as well, you know, and again, this is something that's kind of like bugged me for years. You know, if on the one hand they try and paint the picture of Oswald being ex-military, ex-links with Russia. You know, we all know it was a pretty poor shot in his US Army training, right? Okay, you could argue that when he defected to Russia, they decided they were going to train him to, you know, the best marksman in the world. You could argue that point. It's all conjecture. It's all speculation. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if they're trying to sell us the story that he who he was and that he had all these links with Russia and everything else, and that he was trained by the KGB and blah blah blah, right? Surely to goodness, if you're going to assassinate the president of the United States, you ain't going to do it with a bloody rifle like, to be honest, right? You're going to get as close to as you possibly can, and you're going to do it with a handgun, which can be easily concealed. You're going to whip it out your pocket in very similar situation and pattern to how Jack Ruby allegedly shot Oswald, right? You know, right up in your face or stomach, whatever you want to call it. You're right there with a gun that you've managed to smuggle in because nobody's seen it, right? You know, again, you know, Jack Ruby sacrificed himself for the rest of his life in prison, because he knew that that's what he had to do for whatever reason. That's another whole nother story which we can go into later. But he knew he had to do that, right? Whether it was for himself or whether he was instructed to do it by the mob or whatever. He knew he had to do it, so he made sure that he wasn't going to miss. Now, you know, if Oswald was the assassin, or any assassin is going to do something similar, they're not going to stick themselves up in a book depository with a bloody crappy rifle like that, which, you know, everybody that knows anything about rifles knows that's one of the worst rifles as well, in terms of, you know, bolt action. It's not a sniper rifle unless you're doing a one shot, and we all know that there wasn't just one shot. The whole thing is just ridiculous. Do you know the funny thing I was talking to you earlier before we recorded about a colleague at work who was 25, and I said to him about, you know, what's your opinion on it? And he was like, first of all, he was like, who? And I was like, yeah, okay, well, clearly you don't care about it. And he said to me, well, why does it bother you so much? Why do you want to know? And I said, well, because there is truth there, but nobody knows what the truth is. And he said, well, it's like the Loch Ness Monster, isn't it? And I went, what do you mean it's like the Loch Ness Monster? And he said, well, how many years ago was the so-called sighting of the Loch Ness Monster? And I said, I don't know, it was like, you know, about 100 years ago or something like that. And he said, so if somebody now took a movie on their phone or whatever of the Loch Ness Monster and they put it on social media, you still wouldn't believe it. And I thought, yeah, you got a point. And what he was trying to say was that if somebody actually comes out now and say, right, this is what happened, right? Here is proof, we still wouldn't believe it. And the reason we wouldn't believe it is because so many years have gone by with so many different spins on everything that people have got minds made up now, right? And if you've got your mind made up, you're not going to get shifted either way. So it's exactly the same with the moon landing. If somebody comes out and say, yeah, actually, we did do the moon landing, so we put a man on the moon, but everything you saw was fake because it was all done in the studio because we didn't have the technology to beam it back to Earth, right? We'd still go, well, no, that's not right. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so let's take a look at what happened. So the shooting officially started at, or did it start at 12:29, or it was taking place at 12:30 anyway? So we've discussed this before about the pinpointedness of that. At first sight, just seems that time seems very pinpointed, in my opinion. It could just be a coincidence. Could have just been one of those things. I think the flight was due to arrive at Love Field at 11:30, and then it didn't actually arrive until 11:55. And I think it was predicted that the motorcade would arrive in Dealey Plaza at 12:25. It arrived at 12:30, so it was 5 minutes behind schedule. And I think JFK had stopped a few times on the way to shake hands and so on. So it was also a Friday. I think it was the Friday before Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving, I might be wrong, but I think Thanksgiving was the following Thursday because it's the fourth Thursday of November. Then, of course, Christmas is in December. And then you're moving into 1964, and then there were the presidential elections were going to be taking place later that year. So, Jace, have you got anything to say about the timing of it? Do you think it's relevant, or it didn't make any difference?
Like you say, the actual timings themselves could have been coincidental. I know that the you can see actually in the footage of when the Kennedys arrived at Love Field, the Secret Service and the CIA guys were a little bit fractious of the fact that JFK decided to go and shake hands with the public that were at the airport and all the rest of it. Yeah. They clearly didn't want them to do that. It was obviously going to delay what happened. And went on from there to somewhere else, I believe. I don't think it was direct from there to.
No. They went. No, they'd been in Fort Worth earlier. They'd flown from Fort Worth, so they.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they'd been at breakfast. Yeah. They'd been at a breakfast reception earlier that morning. That's right. But they went direct from Love Field to Dealey Plaza. Yeah.
But either way, obviously on that footage, you can see that the are getting fractured. The fact that they weren't getting straight into the limo and all the rest of it. So yeah, it might be relevant. The thing about the whole timing thing for me though is the fact it was all done very, very quickly. I mean, we're talking from the time that the actual first shot rang out to the time he was pronounced dead. Was it at 1 o'clock? I think he was pronounced dead.
Yeah, 1 o'clock. Yeah.
It was bang on. It was bang on, wasn't it? It was bang on 1 o'clock, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, he didn't die at 1 o'clock, but the announcement was at 1 o'clock, right? So you're talking less than an hour, I think. Am I right in saying
that? What? After arrival at Love Field?
No, but the shot, the first shot. What time did the first shot happen?
12:30.
Yeah, 12:30. So in half an hour, he's pronounced dead. Yeah. And then what time did Oswald arrested?
Yeah, I'm not absolutely sure, but I think it was 1:35. I could be wrong on that. It might be 1:45. Something in my head says it's 1:35, but it doesn't sound right. But yeah, 1:35 perhaps.
All right, so we're still on less than 2 hours since the first when Oswald got arrested, right? Either way. Now, in that time, he's supposed to have walked, isn't he, from the book depository to the theatre and the place where he shot Tippit? He's supposed to have walked, right?
Oh, he couldn't have walked in that time to the theatre, so they reckon he took some transportation to his lodgings in Oak Cliff, and then they say he walked from his lodgings to the theatre. But that's a grey area.
Okay, well, let's it is a grey area. It is a grey area, and if he drove or he took a bus or whatever from Dealey Plaza to his lodgings, and then walked to where he allegedly shot Tippit. So he's done all that in that time, and then he's casually gone into a theatre after shooting Tippit, and there was a bit of a distance, I believe, from where he shot Tippit to the theatre.
Yeah.
All right. He then goes into the theatre, and you're not telling me that the amount of law enforcement that arrived within a very short space of time at that theatre, right? When you consider back in Dealey Plaza, you would have thought every available bloody law enforcement officer and agent, whatever, would have been there, right? But no, they're all of a sudden descending upon this theatre, which is quite a distance away from theatre. And all of this was done inside 2 hours. that's, for me, that just doesn't ring true in itself. It does not ring true.
Yeah, basically they were charging him later that evening, and he would be dead. He'd be dead within another 48 hours. He'd be dead. So, which was very convenient. Yeah. The other thing about that timing, there are a few other things. So, I'm not sure it's been absolutely proven, but some people say that the electricity went down in Washington at that precise moment, and also one of the office ladies in the depository said that the electricity went out just as the motorcade was approaching. So that meant the elevators weren't working. So I personally believe some of that, if not all of that, is true. So that would suggest something is going on, and if that is going on, Lee Harvey Oswald couldn't manage all of that himself. And also one other point, as regards the timing, it's on a Friday. I guess, for something as important as the presidential assassination, you're not going to worry about whether it's a weekend or not, or a Thanksgiving or Christmas, but you know how things are. There's always going to be something that you're not able to do as quickly as you would like because of those obstacles. And in the Warren Commission, I forget who it was it Richard Russell or somebody? He felt that Dulles was kind of dragging things out. So I think it's we could bear in mind that timing might have been relevant. 12:30, 1 o'clock, they're very precise times. So
remember that, aren't they?
Yeah. Okay, so so the shooting took place at 12:30 in Dealey Plaza. So were there any injuries or any fatalities? So of course JFK was fatally shot. John Connally was shot. James Tague, who was a bystander down by, I'm not sure the correct, I think it's called the Triple Overpass, although he was standing on the road below the overpass. So do you call that the Triple Underpass? I don't know what you call that. But anyway, he was on his cheek, or a bullet rebounded off the curbstone or something and flicked his cheek or something like that. So I don't think it was too serious. And then, but the other thing is this is another gray area, but in the official record, a Secret Service guy was killed in the motorcade, but not necessarily in Dealey Plaza. Apparently, it was before they arrived at Dealey Plaza, but nobody seems to know a lot about it. And James Rowley, he was the head of Secret Service, he said something about it, and a few other people said something about it. I think there was a guy called Chuck Robinson, I think his name was, and he was out of the Secret Service office in Fort Worth. Was it in Fort Worth? He seemed to be absent after the motorcade. So I saw something where people thought, was he the guy that was killed? And if he was killed, what were the circumstances? Somebody
wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, there was a Secret Service guy. And where it was, I was reading, some people said it was way back towards Love Field on, was it Harwood Avenue or something? But then I read something else. It was actually Dealey Plaza or just by the sheriff's office. And I've read about things where a guy walked out into the street and said something.
How was he killed?
Yeah, we don't know. So I don't know that, but that's a mystery. So, but I was reading about this guy. I think, was it Fort Worth, the Secret Service, or were they based in Dallas? I'm not sure. I think it was Fort Worth. And apparently he got wind of an assassination attempt, wasn't having any part of it, and he before Motorcade arrived, he left the office, and there doesn't seem to be much of a record about what happened to him after that. I just wonder whether he tried to do something about the assassination attempt. So yeah, that's a mystery.
I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah, I think that needs to be corroborated, to be honest, because as I said, there doesn't seem to be much information on it. But I just wonder, it does seem to me that people were aware that an assassination attempt was possible. But having said that, they received lots of threats. Apparently it happens all the time, not only during the Kennedy presidency, any presidency. Yeah. Okay, so the shooting takes place 12:30. JFK has been shot. Connally's been shot. James Tague, I don't know, did he go to hospital, or did he just carry? Seems to me he just carried on as if he was all right. So then we've got to think about what was the response. So JFK and Connally were in the limousine. So of course the limousine sped away to Parkland Hospital. So what was the response? Of course, the limousine was the responsibility of the Secret Service, but the security operation wasn't just the Secret Service, it was also Dallas Police Department. So how did they respond? I guess it's logical that the limousine would speed away to the hospital, but how about the response of the police, Jace? What did they?
We all know it was shocking. I mean, the limousine itself was a crime scene. Now, you know, I know it was 1963, and you can excuse a lot of 1963, I suppose, but you know, 1963 wasn't the dark ages. You know, it was a crime scene at the end of the day. I know the forensic stuff has moved on a lot since 1963 and everything else, but surely you would be securing the minute that Jack Kennedy has got out of that car and the occupants of that car have got out, you would be securing that limo, right? Not allowing all and sundry to take photographs and lean over it, drop a bullet in it, you know, all that kind of stuff. You wouldn't be allowing anyone to go near it. You'd be calling it off. You wouldn't have it parked at the front of the hospital. It'd be secured around the back somewhere where nobody could access it. And you'd cordon it off, and you'd get it dusted for prints. You'd get it, you know, dusted for gunshot residue. All ballistics would be all over it. Everything would be all over it. But having said that, allowed people to take photographs of the back seat, which bizarrely was very clean, considering what's just happened. Apart from, you know, some flowers that Jackie had left behind on the back seat. So, you know, considering you've got one statement saying that, oh, there was brain tissue and blood and all kinds of residue all over the back of the car, there wasn't. It was absolutely spotless in the photographs that I've seen. So, you know, who knows? Was it clean? Was it clean before people were allowed to take photographs of it? And if so, why? Or was there no residue? You know, it's just so many questions. So later on as well, and I don't know again what the timescale was, but there is a photograph of the limo outside the hospital with the roof on, with the bubble on. How the hell did they get that from Love Field to the hospital? Is there any documentation of how that roof bubble arrived? No. I mean, that it must have been a pretty big vehicle to get that from Love Field to the hospital. It's just millions and millions of questions. But yes, your question was, what about the response? What did the police do? Well, bugger all, basically.
Yeah, we can take a look about whether it was just negligence or whether it was something more sinister. Yeah, further to that point, I just wonder about the jurisdiction of the sheriff's office. Like, I'm not American, so I don't really know a lot about US police enforcement, but Dealey Plaza, I'm sure, is within the city. So would the sheriff have had any jurisdiction there? Because they were stood down, weren't they, from security and the motorcade? So could they have helped if they hadn't been stood down?
Well, yeah, they could have done. But I know that there's for want of a better statement, there is a Trumping sort of status, isn't there? In as much as you've got federal law, you've got state law, you've got governor law, you've got all these kind of things in America. Again, I'm no expert on it, but I do know that, for example, in the case of homicide in any state in America, if you've got the local law enforcement in attendance, if the FBI turn up, they trump it, right? And I don't know what the order of trumping is, but it kind of works like that. So yeah, you can get your local sheriff who's like first on the scene, and then all of a sudden it's not his case anymore because the FBI have deemed it to be their case, so he gets down. In the case of the head of state or whatever you want to call him, being gunned down, I guess CIA and FBI are going to literally trump everything else. I would have said, they're going to say, this is a situation which doesn't happen every day. So what we say goes, kind of thing. And I guess that's kind of what happened in the hospital as well. With the actual state law would have said that an autopsy should have been performed within the state, but we know about the absolute comical, half-assed autopsy that took place back in Leicester or wherever it was, and all the sort of in-house medical surgeons, doctors, specialists, whatever, at Parkland were basically told to get out of the room, so yeah, craziness, absolute craziness.
Yeah, you just talked about the limousine, about how it should have been sectioned off or whatever. So at Parkland, we could also look at the well, actually, there were two crime scenes. If you think about it, the limousine was one crime scene, and it actually moved. So usually a crime scene doesn't move; it stays intact. So basically, and you just sealed it off. But of course, the limousine moved, so is pretty unusual in that respect. And it kind of seems a little bit similar to me to the attempts on de Gaulle's life in France, where they tried to shoot him in a moving car. So I'm pretty sure you've seen the day of the day of the jackal. You've seen the day of the jackal, haven't you? So,
and the Pope as well. He got shot at, didn't he, in his Pope-mobile and stuff.
Yeah. So, yes, I think crime scene investigation in the 60s was a little bit different, but really, that part of the road wasn't closed. The surrounding grass areas, they weren't sealed off. People were just trampling about and mulling around. What have you got to say about that? Is that normal, or would you say that's just negligence?
Well, I guess it's one of those sort of events that unless unless you plan the event, you can't plan for it, right? If you plan the event, then if you're going to do it properly, you'd have to then involve all of the agents, all of the law enforcement, everything, and they would all have to know that that event was going to happen, right? That's not happen, all right. I think if it's a conspiracy, to shoot whatever, they're gonna do that. They're gonna arrange the shooting. They're not going to tell the police. They're not going to tell certain members of the FBI. I would imagine some would have known, but again, we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole in a very murky area there. What I would say is that in the event of that moment being so massive, there is a fair amount of panic. There is going to be a fair amount of people running around like headless chickens and not knowing what to do. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Even the grassy knoll probably should have been cordoned off, but people were running because as we all know, people thought that's where a shot or shots came from.
Yeah.
So people ran in that direction. People also ran the opposite direction of the picket fence. But any one person, if there was a bullet fragment or a casing or whatever lying nearby, they could kick it or trample on it.
Yeah.
Trample on it into the mud or the grass that bullet could even still be there.
Which could have been the intention.
It absolutely could have been. Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, very, very, all very, very murky. It's very, very murky. That was very murky. And in hindsight's a wonderful thing. But if I'd been a senior law enforcement officer on that scene at that particular time, I'm guessing what I would be doing would be getting as many other law enforcement agents as possible, and actually detaining as many people in that area as possible. I mean,
exactly.
Physically impossible.
It seems to me,
physically impossible. But nobody should have been allowed to leave that crime scene.
Yeah, it seems to me that they questioned or detained people who didn't need detaining and didn't detain the people that did. For example, exactly. The umbrella man, dark complected man.
I was going to say that. I was just going to be saying that. I mean, my first reaction, again, hindsight is a wonderful thing, right? My first reaction would be to look around, see who's suspicious, right? Who looks suspicious? Yeah, and I'd be going up to a guy. On a sunny day, saying, I know it was November, but I'd be going up to him on a sunny day. Why have you got your umbrella up? And, is it because you don't like sunlight on your head, but you've got a hat on as well, mate? Seriously.
Yeah, I think I would be asking as well. Do
you know what I mean?
I think I'd be asking if I could take a look at the umbrella as well, to be honest. And also asking the guy that was next to him what that package in his back was. So it seems he had like a radio or something stuffed down his trousers. Okay, so it was a joke. There was no sealing off of the area. So then, like you were saying, you're going to look around. Anybody suspicious? Well, I'm looking at that video. That umbrella guy looks very suspicious. Apparently, he was pumping his umbrella up and down. The guy next to him had his fist up in the air. He seemed to have a radio in his back pocket. There are others, like that babushka lady as well. She behaves strangely as well. I had a camera. And when you see the Zapruder film, with the caveat, we don't know whether the footage has been photoshopped, but there's like a really bright light coming from a camera. just at the moment that Kennedy pulls alongside her. So she was standing directly opposite Zapruder. So anyway, so a lot of people ran up the knoll. Other people were interested in the book depository.
Did anybody run in the direction of the book depository though?
Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, I guess a lot of the footage we see was focused on Kennedy. So that was around the Grassy Knoll area. So a lot of the footage shows that area. It doesn't really show the depository so much. But
yeah, but if you're a secret service agent, right, and your job is to protect the president,
yeah,
right, that is your sole job,
yeah.
right? What are you doing? What are you doing, right? Are you looking around to see if there's any windows open, right? No.
Yeah, I think.
Do you know what I mean?
I think Clint Hill said was when he was coming down Elm Street, he said he was just had his eyes fixated on the umbrella guy. I think was it the umbrella guy? He said he had his eyes fixed on the one guy. But and I guess he sped off. So he.
But how many Secret Service agents were present though, right?
Well, they were
so
all...
even if you just tasked one of them, just to look up and around, right? And if you see a window open, you get in there and you get it shut, or you go and investigate it straight away, right? Or you get on the radio and get somebody else to do it. That window was open apparently the whole time. There are statements from the convicts that were opposite in the court building and whatever. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that window was open the whole time, right? So even before the motorcade got there should have been Secret Service agents. There were Secret Service agents in that area that should have been combing and scanning for open windows, right? I mean, that's the number one thing that you do in a situation like that. I mean, it's
okay.
The whole thing stinks. It absolutely stinks.
Okay, so the limousine has sped off. People have rushed up the knoll. I think some people were kind of hanging around the book depository. And then people start leaving and
interesting point there, right? So a lot of people left the scene at that time, right?
Yeah.
You could argue they were scared, or they, would just wanted to get away from it, whatever, right? Yeah. People left. They shouldn't have been allowed to leave. That's right. The first thing,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
Nobody should have been allowed to leave that whole area, right?
You're right. Yeah.
But a lot of people did. Now, how did they leave? Where did they go? And how did they go there? Right? Yeah. That's the next thing, right? So let's just, for argument's sake, saying a lot of people leave that area at that particular point, and they're going to use roads in order to do that, right? Now, those roads would have been pretty clogged up as it is. Yeah. So they couldn't have made a fastish, getaway, whatever. Yeah. You know what it's like when we've been to football matches, right? We all leave a football match. How bloody long does it take us to get out in our car onto our journey, or even get to our car? Yeah? Right? But we're meant to believe that Lee Harvey Oswald casually came out of the book depository, got in his car like there was no traffic on the road, and got to where he had to get to within that 2-hour window. Yeah? Absolutely, never in a million years.
Yeah. Okay, so so the police are looking around the that car park, which I think was the county sheriff's car park. So if there were shots from behind the picket fence, I think I'm right in saying that is the sheriff's car park. So you'd imagine that not any Tom, Dick, or Harry could use that car park, that it would be for the sheriff's office to use. So and then also they were looking around the Texas School Book Depository, but Dealey Plaza, I mean, it's not just the school book depository or the sheriff's car park. I mean, there are a lot of other buildings there. So it seems to me that while we or they seem to be focusing on those areas, it could have been actually to the detriment of the investigation, i.e., they should have been looking elsewhere too. And they didn't seem to be paying much attention to some of those other buildings. So I think, you know,
Yeah, you're right.
There was a Daltex, the County Records building, the jail. I think there was a new building being constructed. I'm not sure about that, but I think there was a new building being constructed a bit further over. There was the US Post Office building with the can you believe it? The CIA and FBI had offices in that building opposite. So,
Of course I did.
You know, so I get a bit suspicious when people don't seem to talk about those other possibilities. Okay, so
Well, deniability, isn't it?
okay, so were there any immediate obvious suspects? I think the guy with the umbrella, the guy next to him, to me, they're suspects. They were behaving unusually, like you said. I mean, the only guy in Dealey Plaza with an umbrella, and not only with an umbrella, he had it up. I think years later, like with a lot of the other characters that were produced, where 20, 30 years later, you're not able to corroborate their identity. So some guy, Louis Blewett or something like that, I can't remember his name. He said, oh, it was a protest about Kennedy's father, and he'd been an appeasement guy apparently in the Second World War, I think. So it was like aping Chamberlain or something like that. I mean, basically it's a bullshit story in my opinion. So in my opinion, they're suspects. Can you think of anybody? Sorry?
Was that the name of the guy? Was that the name of the umbrella guy you just said?
Say that again. Yeah, say that again.
Was that the name of the umbrella guy that you just said?
Well, they 20 or 30 years later, maybe that's exaggerating. I think maybe for the HSCA, the late 70s investigation, some guy was identified as the umbrella man, and he came out with this story. But to be honest, I don't believe it myself.
That's the point, though, isn't it? The point is that, you know, why wasn't he questioned at the time?
Yeah.
Why wasn't he arrested at the time?
Yeah, and name, details taken, and so on. Photographs taken years later. Yeah. I mean, it could be anybody. You could just, you know, it could be me or you could say, "Oh, that was me." You know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so you know, that is the whole point, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that I would say that literally every single person that was within that area is a suspect. Every single, until ruled out, you're a suspect. Even if you're a kid, you're still a suspect. All right.
Yeah, you know,
that's the way I look at it.
And you've seen Naked Gun, you know, the Leslie Nielsen films where in the crime scene investigations they got like the outline on the water and all that, and then they're doing all this with brushes and all this kind of thing. You don't see any of that in Dealey Plaza, do you? So there is absolutely none of that. There is none of it. Absolutely none of that. There was no crime scene investigation, in my opinion.
The other thing as well, you know, if I, again, hindsight and all that, but if I'm a copper there and it's just been shot, irrespective of who it is, somebody's just been shot, right? And then somebody runs past me, going away from it, right? I'm putting my arm out and I'm going, "Where are you going, pal?" Right? Do you know what I mean? Not one copper did that. Not one copper stopped anybody from running away from that scene.
Yeah, you're right.
You know,
Everybody they should have been stopping anybody from leaving. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Although, of course, there were a lot of people, but so be it. Can't be helped. Okay.
yeah, but you would think, you would think a policeman's instinct, even if there were like 100 people running past him, his instinct's going to be to stop one of them, right? Just one of them. But none of them were stopped. Not one of them.
Okay, so
You know? And like you say, the ones that he did take statements off, they were questioning the wrong people. You know, it's like,
yeah. Okay, so where did this take place? It took place in Dallas, Texas. So a few weeks prior to the Kennedy visit, Adlai, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, Adlai Stevenson. He was a prominent politician, had visited Dallas, and he'd had a really tough time. They were rocking his car and all sorts. So what kind of city was it? So it was a Jim Crow city, which is kind of like a US version of apartheid. Of course, it's in the South. So it had a very hardline right wing. I don't like to use left wing, right wing terminology, to be honest, but let's just say it wasn't very tolerant. Wasn't very tolerant of people who believed in helping poorer people and stuff like that. So
we're going back to when JFK was elected. There was all that controversy about JFK stole the election by winning Texas, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there's also that controversy about, you know, the vote rigged in Texas and blah blah blah. Not that that's ever happened since, right? The vote was rigged in Texas, and that Joe Kennedy's father, was kind of behind that to ensure that his son got the election. So that everybody said that Kennedy stole the election, and it was all based around Texas. And the whole of him going to Texas on that particular occasion was obviously he was coming up for re-election or whatever you want to call it. And it was a key thing that they had to win over the Texan state.
Yeah. There were three
which is
elements.
why he was going great margin.
Yeah, there were three elements. There was like Connally, he was like a conservative Democrat, so he later would join the Republican Party, and then you had Johnson, who was kind of in the middle, and then you had Ralph Yarborough, who was in one of the follow-up cars in the motorcade. He was more liberal, and Yarborough and Johnson hated each other. So there are rumors that if Johnson was part of the assassination, that he wanted Yarborough in the car alongside Kennedy and not Connally. There's a rumor that he begged Connally not to be in the car with Kennedy. But yeah, I think going back to rigging election, I'm not sure about Texas. It might have been Texas as well. Yeah, I think the big rigging took place further up north. Was it in Chicago or Minnesota? Yeah, but yeah, I think Joe Kennedy certainly got his son elected.
Yeah. In the same way that George Bush Jr. elected, but we won't go.
Yeah. I mean, well, that was another joke, wasn't it?
Yeah. So also sprung to light in the recent documentaries that I've seen in the last couple of weeks was the rumor that John was actually having an affair with Jackie Kennedy as well.
Who was having an affair?
Who was
Johnson.
Yeah.
Really? Lyndon Johnson.
So this is sprung to light in these last couple of documentaries, right? And they actually played a telephone recording, which had again come out of the archive, whatever, of Johnson phoning Jackie the day following the assassination, right?
Yeah.
Again, I know it. You know, you can say, oh, it's all subjective and it's all, you know, inadmissible and all that kind of stuff. But you know, you listen to the two voices; they clearly sound like Jackie and Johnson, and they're having a conversation. And she is very jolly. She's very flirtatious. It's the day after, right? This is the day after, and he's very flirtatious with her as well. And to me, it just doesn't sound like two people that are mourning a husband and president of the United States. You know, it's less than 24 hours later, this phone call. Then, you know, thinking about, well, what was going on there? You know?
Yeah, there seemed to be an awful lot of love triangles going on. I mean, you know, if JFK was sleeping with all the women's, it's rumored he was, then from the outside looking in, it seems to me that Jackie knew about it but didn't worry about it, and then and maybe she was, you know, playing around a bit as well. I don't know. You know.
Well, I think sort of well known without being proven, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so that's Dallas. On a smaller scale, what about Dealey Plaza? So I already talked about it. So where the focus in the research, or especially in the investigation, seems to be on the Grassy Knoll, the car park, the depository. But if we scan around, actually you have the Triple Overpass. Then you have the Sheriff's car park. I think it's the Sheriff's car park, the school book depository, the Daltex building. You move over, is it the County Records building? It's the jail next to that. Then maybe the corner of the sheriff's office. And then you come back around. And that area, I've seen a map, but there's a US post office building. There might be a few other buildings there. I mean, surely those, you know, if somebody was shooting, they could have shot from those buildings as well. And as I said, I think the CIA, the FBI, they had offices in that US post office building. And the boss of the post office, Harry Holmes, he had an office on the corner, and apparently it had a grandstand view of the Elm Street, and would have had a grandstand view of the limousine coming down Elm Street. And it seems to me as well, it's almost like a copy and paste of New Orleans. So if you remember Kevin Costner in JFK, he gets his assistant attorneys to come to Camp Street, Lafayette Street early on the Sunday morning. He says, look, this is the FBI, ONI, and all this. And Dealey Plaza is almost identical. We've got these kind of companies. We don't really know what they were doing in this Texas School Book Depository. Everybody thinks of it as just this one company, but I think there were actually lots of little companies within that building. You had the Daltex.
I mean,
it's like, and all those offices. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Oliver Stone's film described it perfectly. I think for me, you know, it was a turkey shoot, and you know, what better place to have that triangulation of crossfire? You know, it's like the minute the first shot rang out, every single one, and there were enough law enforcement agents there to do it. We know that, right? That's a given fact. Every single one of those doorways to all of those buildings should have been secured, so nobody went in or nobody came out. But we also know that a lot of those buildings interconnected with each other. So you wouldn't have been able to secure the buildings, even if you had a law enforcement officer on the door and the back door, because people were able to go between the buildings.
The other thing about that,
interconnected.
So if you were gonna try and assassinate the president of USA, would you try and do it in the law enforcement intelligence hub of the city? You could choose almost any other spot. You could have gone just around the corner. You could have gone further back on the motorcade, anywhere in Dallas. I don't know. I've never been to Dallas, but my guess, anywhere else would have been just like where you and I live, with a couple of shops, a few houses, not a policeman in sight, not an intelligence officer in sight. This was the hub, the law enforcement intelligence hub of the city. And he's getting murdered right in the middle of it, right? All those buildings, he's getting murdered right in the middle of that hub.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that, because I mean, whenever I've watched president getting off of Air Force One, right? Doesn't matter who they are. You know, all of the presidents that have existed in my lifetime, in my memory, when I see them emerge from the door of the plane onto the top of the steps coming down from the plane, I've always thought that's the ideal place to shoot somebody, because there's nowhere for them to go, right? And if you're gonna shoot somebody anyway, you're not going to do it in a ridiculously bloody awkward place to do it, like you say, in the eye of all the law enforcement agents and everything that you've got in that particular place, and all the buildings and everything else. Yeah. You're not going to. Why would you do that? Why would you even do that? You just take them out at the most convenient point. Most convenient point. It just makes no sense. Makes no sense at all.
Also, Dealey Plaza.
Another thing I was going to ask you about.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go on, because we'll go off track. We'll go off track. Carry on.
No, go ahead. It's okay. I got things written down.
Because it's a slightly different topic. So you carry on going through your.
Yeah, but you might forget about it. So go ahead. It's okay. I can bring it back. It's okay. Go ahead.
I've half forgotten about it anyway. So carry on.
Yeah, the other thing about Dealey Plaza, it's the heart of the old city. It's where the city sprouted from, and that area was built over the old area, and apparently there are loads of tunnels underneath the plaza.
Yeah, that's what I said. They're all interconnected. All those buildings are interconnected via the tunnels and stuff. So
the CIA have got an office
know that.
there. The FBI got an office there, and some of those companies they had intelligence connections. Let's say, I mean, you could have taken a shot.
I remember what it was.
I think one of the tunnels actually comes up under the jail. So you could have been a prisoner. Yeah, sure. You could have been a prisoner in jail, and then just opened the trapdoor, gone along the tunnel, shot the president, and gone back to the prison cell, and nobody know any better. And they say,
well, if you were allowed to do
it. Yeah, well, I wouldn't put it past law enforcement in Dallas, to be honest. Okay.
No. Well,
okay. So
we don't know what they will do.
Anyway, we set the scene. Okay, so what have we got? So how is?
I've remembered what it was. I've written it down, by the way.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's get out of the way. Go ahead.
No, because I know we will get to it. And I've written it down. So when we get to it, I'm going to ask.
Okay, so how is JFK doing? So he was shot in the limousine. The limousine sped off to Parkland. So how's he doing? Well, not very well. So he's pronounced dead at
not having his best day.
You are.
He's not having his best day, is he? Really?
No. So So anyway, he's pronounced dead at 1 o'clock. He'd been served the last rites by a priest. So
again, pronounced dead at 1 o'clock. He was shot at 12:30.
Yeah.
Pronounced dead at 1 o'clock. You know what took him so long?
Yeah.
Right. What time did he have at the hospital?
Yeah. Those times, 12:30, 1 o'clock, did they have any meaning? I don't want to get too paranoid about it, but maybe they did. I don't know. But anyway,
what time did he get to the hospital, though? Do we know?
yeah, I think it's recorded, but I don't remember, to be honest. I don't think it took them that long. I think they were there within the 15 minutes. I don't think it was that long.
Because you know what? I'm thinking, well, okay, somebody's actually got to physically get the body of the president, right? Because at that point he's not declared dead, right? Somebody's got to get the president out of the car, yeah,
yeah,
and onto a gurney or whatever you want to call it to get him into the hospital, yeah. Well, I'm not being funny, but the minute he's like got hold of and put onto that gurney, somebody's going to be going, yeah, there ain't no pulse there. He's dead already.
Yeah.
So why is it then God knows how long to actually announce that he's dead? Right?
I don't know the procedures and time spans for things like that, so I'm not sure.
The guy's got half of his head missing. He's instantly dead.
Okay, so I think for the evidence, I'm not a police officer, but it seems to me the body is a good place to start on the evidence. So the first witnesses to his post shooting would be in Dealey Plaza. So several witnesses said that there was a hole. Clint Hill said when he was running from the follow-up car, was it the Queen Mary? There was a hole in the back of JFK's head. So, and I think there were other witnesses in Dealey Plaza who'd said, we've seen the Zapruder film, whether or not that's authentic or not, I don't know. But there were several witnesses just in Dealey Plaza itself who said that his head was blown out. And when the body got to Parkland, the doctors there said there was an entry wound through the neck. They also corroborated what the Dealey Plaza witnesses said, that there was a hole in the back of the head. There was a large part of his head missing.
Perfectly intact in the photograph, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, that we're going to move on to that a bit later, the autopsy and so on. But for the time being, his body wasn't in the same state as it appeared in some of the photos or sketches that are shown in the Warren report, I think. So have you got anything to add about the body, Jace?
Well, again, you got the heat of the moment stuff, and I suppose with the, let's play devil's advocate and say that the sketch that was presented to the Warren Commission was accurate. All right, if that was accurate, then the bullet hole is there, right?
Yeah,
not in the back of his head; it's in the neck, right?
Yeah.
So that's on drawing. It's on the neck, right? So that's a big difference between back of the head and neck. Massive difference, right? Now these are say pathological experts that have done these drawings and all the rest of it. If it was in the back of the neck, then that is conducive to the photograph that we've seen at the hospital, or so say the photographs of the back of his head where everything's intact and all, a bit messy with blood, but actually intact, right? There's no apparent gaping hole back of the head. But then that contradicts then the fact that if you also again look at the picture of the head, it's intact. Bit messy with matter and what have you, but the side of the head here, or here as it is, whichever way you're looking at it, because I think the image is reversed on me at the moment. So if you're looking here, where in the Zapruder film, that whole part of his head gets peeled back, gets blown back, right? And there's a huge flap, part of which, so say, whether it's brain matter or whether it's bone fragment, goes on the trunk of the car, and Jackie scrambles over to get it. Yeah. Well, that wasn't put back, was it? That wasn't put back so that they could actually take photographs. I mean, none of it makes sense. Whichever. So either Clint Hill's testimony of the head having a hole in the back of it is wrong, or a deliberate lie, or the photograph is fake, or the drawing is a deliberate lie.
Yeah.
Whichever, some of it is wrong. Some of it is wrong. I mean, I'm going to say that if whether he was shot in the head from behind or from the side or from the front, there ain't going to be a lot that is recognizable.
No. Yeah. Let's just go back a bit, because we'll talk about the autopsy a bit later, but of course the autopsy took place at Bethesda, but by law it should have stayed in Dallas. So personally, I think it's pretty obvious why the body left Dallas, because the doctors in Dallas would have told us what the people in Bethesda didn't want to hear. So basically, I think the Secret Service stole the body. And they should never have been allowed to steal it. But what's a doctor to do? I mean, if you got two armed Secret Service guys, you're not going to be able to do much, are you? So, but then were there any Dallas police officers there? I mean, at the hospital. So
probably not.
Surely there should have been Dallas police officers at Parkland guarding the president, but there weren't. Well, maybe there were. I don't know, but so that would have been interesting. Whether if the doctors had, I don't know, maybe they did, but I don't think they did. But if they'd said to the police, these guys shouldn't be taking this body, please stop them. That would have been interesting then if that happened.
So digressing slightly, but on the same track when we're talking about bodies. So Officer Tippit, right? Where was he taken?
Yeah, he was taken. I think he ended up. Did he end up at Parkland? But he'd gone to Walter. Was it the Walter? I think Watery, or he went to some. Was it Baptist Hospital or something like that? He was taken to another hospital first.
Yeah. So the next question is, what was the point of taking him to Parkland?
Yeah.
Right? So he was already dead.
Yeah.
So he was already dead when he went to the hospital. So what was the point of taking Parkland, right?
Yeah, that's strange.
So they took him to Parkland. They took him to Parkland, but have you seen photographs?
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Jay. Say it again.
Have you seen photographs of Tippit before he was shot?
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen photos of when he was shot. I just seen the ones before he was shot.
Who does he bear a passing resemblance to?
Yeah, well, I know. Yeah, I know that story about where they said his nickname was Kennedy or JFK, wasn't it? So, yeah, I mean,
exactly. So, just holding a bit on that theory there. That obviously it's not my theory, the people's theory.
Yeah.
Were they taking him to Parkland again? You need to know the timings, really. But were they taking him to Parkland as a substitute for Kennedy? And was he even killed in the first place? Because he was a double for Kennedy. So therefore, the autopsy photographs that we see of Kennedy, are they really the autopsy photographs of Tippit?
Yeah, but I mean, that seems like a lot of things would have to go right to me for all that to fit. So, a lot of people die. So, there are hundreds of corpses that they could have had available, surely. Although I guess not.
No, I agree. I agree, but it does beg the question: what was the point of taking him to Parkland?
Yeah. I think there is
some point.
Yeah, it does seem a bit odd. And the other thing was, I think Tippit was shot 4 times, and was he shot? Was he shot in the forehead? Was he shot in the forehead? So, although was he shot twice in the forehead or something like that? So some of the wounds were similar as well.
Yeah, exactly. But the other thing is that they'll have us believe that he was shot by the same guy, right?
Yeah.
So they're trying to tell us that the same guy that is able to shoot a police officer at point blank range with a hand pistol, right, is going to choose the remotest, most difficult place to shoot a president from with a dodgy rifle. I mean, they're trying to, the guy that took out Tippit, he was, whether it was Oswald or somebody else, say, right, is an absolute hitman, right? Question, because that whole MO for shooting somebody at that close range to the face is hitman, right? It's not just a random occurrence, random event. That's hitman. It's got hitman written all over it. So what was the point of having Tippit hit unless
Yeah.
It's just the whole thing. It's just you end up going down a rabbit hole, don't you? Because there's just so many questions, so many conjectures, so many theories, so many what ifs, who did this, who did that, all the rest of it. It's just so many.
Yeah, I often wonder, a lot of these things are just red herrings, and they were deliberately inserted red herrings, so we'd all be talking about all these different things. And actually,
but again, with the whole Tippit thing, right? It is documented, so therefore you've got to say that's a fact. It's documented that he was shot at point blank range. Yeah. When they arrested Harvey Oswald, did he have any blood on him?
Yeah.
No, none whatsoever. There was no, no gunshot residue. There was no blood spatter, which would have come back at him, and he was wearing a white t-shirt.
Yeah.
And this is the point that I was going to go on to before. I remember what I was going to ask you. Were you aware that Harvey Oswald was put in an ID parade? Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Actually, I was reading about that.
Have you seen the film?
Sorry.
Have you seen the footage of where? Have you seen the footage of where the police officers are taking him and the other people in the ID parade in the room? Have you seen that?
I think I've seen it a long time ago, but I haven't seen it recently. No. So yeah, remind me.
So have you? Well, in that footage,
yeah,
Lee Harvey Oswald is absolutely kicking off. He's proper kicking off, right? Yeah. Because he's objecting to the fact of being taken in for this ID parade with 4 other guys that were like teenagers, and he wasn't a teenager, right? They were teenagers, and none of them had remotely anywhere near the same kind of clothing as what Lee Harvey Oswald on, which was this, glaring white t-shirt with no blood on it, right? And he's absolutely kicking off as he said he's going, this is a setup, this is an absolute setup, this is a fit up, all this kind of stuff. He's absolutely ranting about it.
2 guys were police officers. Well, I don't know what's going on. Sorry, some balloons. So anyway, so 2 guys were police officers. One was a Mexican, and like you said, the others were teenagers. So you mean,
look remotely.
So he might as well.
But my question was,
he might as well just have been wearing a placard and saying, "Obviously, I'm the guy that they want you to pick out." you know, so.
Yeah, exactly. But my question to you was, who was the person that was identifying, right? And why were they identifying? What were they identifying him for? Were they identifying him for the shooting of Tippit?
Yeah, it was for the shooting of Tippit, not for the shooting of Kennedy. So yeah, I'm not sure which lineup that. I don't know how many lineups they had, because there was Helen Markham, Warren. I think it might have been Warren Reynolds, and then Domingo Benavides. So I'm not sure which lineup that was, but I think it was Warren Reynolds. And was that? Yeah, I'm not absolutely sure which one that was. So, but Warren Reynolds initially wouldn't identify Oswald. And Benavides didn't want to. He didn't. I don't think he even attended the lineup. So, but it was pretty obvious who the outlier was in the lineup.
Yeah, but again, going to what I was saying before about the timeline.
Yeah.
So not only within that sort of 2-hour period, they managed to arrest the Sose killer of the President of the United States.
Yeah.
Who's clearly had to go from the book depository in LA, of people running around, like the traffic, everything. He's meant to have all got there. He's meant to have then killed a police officer, then gone to he's gone to his own tit first. Then he's gone off. Then he's stumbled across this police officer who Sose questioned him for whatever, and he shoots that police officer. And he then goes into the theatre. Then he gets arrested by the entire, Dallas police force, who actually probably should have been back in Dealey, right? And then they somehow managed to arrange in a very, very, very short space of time. And then they get the witness from wherever back to the police station to actually do that whole identification thing. This is all in a very, very, very tiny window.
Yeah.
Whereas in comparing that to like today, for example, when somebody goes into a school and shoots up a school, right?
Yeah.
A whole bloody day passes before they even arrest somebody or shoot somebody for doing it.
Basically, they're trying to create the momentum, the emotion. So basically, they were trying to they're overriding the reason, the logic. They want to build this because John F. Kennedy obviously was a charismatic president. He had a lot of supporters and so on. So they wanted to build up this emotion to convince the people, his supporters, and the opponents. I don't think cared, to be honest, but I think they were aiming their investigation or their cover-up story at his supporters. It's all geared towards winning over his supporters. The president's just been murdered. They've got the guy. Let's convict him. That's it. We got him. We don't need to worry about anything else. Yeah, the other thing about the rapid arrest of Oswald, Jace, is they weren't letting the cars out of the sheriff's car park. So, but as soon as Oswald was arrested, and as you pointed out, it was all so fast. As soon as he was arrested, they let everybody go, all the cars and all that in Dealey Plaza. So the murderer or murderers could have been there, but of course, with the Oswald arrest, it gave them an excuse to just let everybody go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on to the bullets then. So of course, this is a famous part of the shebang. So in the depository, there were bullets found. So I think the first, I can't remember his name now, but the first civilian photographer to arrive on the 6th floor said that was it Will Fritz? I think Will Fritz officially found the bullets, and they were all lined up neatly to each other. And the photographer said that Will Fritz just picked them up and then scattered them. So, but they'd originally been found neatly placed alongside each other. And I think in a reenactment, an FBI reenactment, when they fired the bullets from the Mannlicher, the bullets went flying. I heard 41 feet.
As they would.
That sounds like a long way to me, but they wouldn't even have been in that vicinity. They would have gone miles.
They probably would have gone out the window.
So of course, but there could have been stray bullets, and we talked about James Tague being scarred by a stray one. But
it wasn't a bullet, was it? It was a stone, wasn't it? Stone flew up and hit him. But after
it wasn't a bullet.
The bullet hit the stone.
All right, okay. So so it wasn't the bullet. It was some material that had been had flown up. Ricochet. Okay. So we've got the bullets in JFK's body, and then possibly some bullets that weren't in his body. So I think this is one, obviously, a central part of the investigation. The people who I believe murdered him didn't want, they just couldn't afford for people to get to the truth about the bullets.
I agree. Totally.
So so where were the bullets? What kind of bullets were they? So there have been lots of theories about that. But another
depends on the weapon, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then of course, if you can identify the bullets, then it leads you to the weapons as well. But also, some nurses, apparently, or medical staff at Parkland was saying that, because there was that famous bullet that was found on a gurney, and Paul Landis was talking about that recently. But medical staff was saying there were bullets all over the place. They were finding, they didn't just find, there wasn't just one bullet, there were lots of bullets all over the place being found on gurneys. So
where were they finding them?
Yeah, on the gurneys in Parkland.
Right, see.
Yeah.
And the only bullet they found in the car was the so-so magic bullet, right?
Yeah, was that found in the car? Because
it was conveniently placed, wasn't it, I reckon?
But there was another bullet as well when it was at Parkland. Berkeley, JFK's personal physician, had he asked, or one of the Secret Service guys had gone out to the car, found a bullet, given it to Berkeley, and the bullet was never seen again. And then there's another picture of Kyle Clark, the FBI #2 in Dallas, who is photographed on the inside grass of Dealey Plaza, picking up a bullet, which Jim Garrison said was a bullet from a .45 revolver, and it had blood and brain matter on it, and also hair. So that suggests that there were more than 3 bullets. And if there were more than 3 bullets, then it's very unlikely that Lee Harvey Oswald would have fired all those bullets and that they would have all come from the same weapon.
What about what are the testimonies though that said that however many bullets they heard being fired? They varied, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah. Some people said 3, some people said more than 3. The other thing as
Didn't somebody
well,
say 5?
the other thing about that is, I mean, if we're talking about a conspiracy and we're talking about professionals, then they probably would have been using decoys. So
using what?
decoys, or
Oh yeah, right.
maybe firecrackers or something. Not really, not real gunshots.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. That's a good point. I've never really thought about that. But yeah, you're right. Why wouldn't you? You'd be stupid not to, wouldn't you?
Yeah, these people were experienced. They knew, you know, I mean, they're not just gonna, an inexperienced person. Well, if you're acting on your own, you're not gonna have many devices at your disposal, are you? But if you're a team, you can do all sorts of things. And that's what you'd want to do, to confuse the investigators. So
have you ever considered the possibility? And again, it's fairly remote, and it's just something that occurred once upon a time, that with Dealey Plaza being Dealey Plaza and its layout and all the rest of it, obviously that thing was, was made public, albeit not massively ahead of schedule, but it was made public, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever considered the possibility that, and this would involve a lot of incidents, I grant you, that given the amount of people that did want to be out of the way, you could have had the crazed lone gunman, but you could potentially have also had another or others all at the same spot to have a pop at him, right? And then they could have just been, let's just paint a picture here, right? So you've got one guy, let's just say the loneman nutter is up in the book depository, right?
Yeah.
You've then got another guy who thinks, yeah, this is my great opportunity. This is a completely unconnected guy or woman, whatever, completely unconnected to Oswald, completely unconnected to anything else that we've discussed or talked about, that thinks, this is my ideal opportunity as well. I'm going to plant myself up on the overpass.
Yeah.
And you could actually then get another one that thinks, yeah, this is a perfect opportunity for me. God, there's a lot of space here. I can take the president out, whatever. I'm going to perch myself behind the picket fence, right? So you could have had 3 independent people all lining up to shoot the president at the same time, right? The first shot rings out, and the other two think, shit, I've got to do this now, or I'm never going to do it, right? So the first shot triggers the other two, kind of thing. Do you know what I'm saying? And
yes.
we could have a situation where, and again, we will never know. We could have a situation where you've got 3 would-be assassins all bang at the same time,
Independent of each other, you mean?
Yeah, completely independent of each other,
so
having no knowledge that each of the other was going to do it.
Actually, the HSCA, they concluded there were I think they said there were definitely 2 shooters, but a conspiracy should.
Is that the House Select? Select, yeah.
But that the extent of a conspiracy shouldn't be exaggerated, or should be considered with caution. So, personally, I don't think that's what happened. I don't think there were people shooting independently of each other, but you shouldn't completely dismiss it either. But I don't think that's what happened. But, we were saying what a crazy place Dallas was. And there were a lot of people out to get him,
Yeah.
But for them all to be located in Dealey Plaza, I think makes it unlikely, in my opinion. I mean, you'd have had them one somewhere else.
But in a way, yeah, but in a way, it was kind of advertised, wasn't it? It's like that was like an advert. Publishing that route was like an advert to any would-be assassin. It was like, come and have a go if you think you're good enough, you know?
What I should say as well, the Dallas Morning News. So I think the map was published in the Dallas Morning News. They had an office in that post office building as well. I should add.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the bullets, and now we've got to talk about the shots. Where did they come from? So if you can identify the bullets, it helps to know where the shots came from. But there are different ways to there are other ways to consider where they might have come from as well. But I think Jim De Eugenio was talking about a criminalist who's a person who talks about crimes, was saying that without tracking in the autopsy, we can't really know where the bullets come from. And in the autopsy, the I don't know what you call them, the coroners or the I don't know what you call those guys, Humes. What was his official title? I don't know. So forensic pathologist. Was it forensic pathologist or something like that? So he was told by, if you remember from the movie JFK, he was trying to track, and he was told by somebody in the military, I think it was, not to bother. So and there was a reason for that, because if you do that, then you can track or possibly track from which direction the bullets came. So so officially we don't really know, but then we got to try and guess where they came from. So we've got like the film footage, but again, we talked about this before. Has that stuff been doctored? It's difficult to know whether to believe your own eyes. So I was showing you that Orville Nix film where if you slow it down, you can see vapor trails coming from up by the Triple Overpass. I personally think there was somebody in the drain. That's what Jim Garrison thought as well. But I'm not discounting.
You really believe that, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was somebody in the drain myself. And then obviously people thought they heard shots from behind the picket fence. I think there were several locations. There's also the hole in the windscreen, the windshield. So, and people have said that shot came from the South Knoll, which is on the other side of the plaza. You think there were shots, or I don't know whether you still think that, whether that shots came from the train passing over. And of course the depository, Daltex building, county court from the roof. I was reading as well that some prisoners in the jail said they saw somebody shooting from the top of the post office building. So there are all those kinds of places that. What are your thoughts of Jace about where the shots came from?
Again, for me, even if you did have like a triangulated crossfire and you had like top marksman put in place, my question is always why would you do that? Because of that whole risk of failure. I mean, I know they succeeded. I get that, but the risk of failure for me, even with top marksmen sat on top of a roof.
Yeah, but
if you don't get it wrong, you don't get it right.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about, those shots is decoys. I think the real stuff was happening close range, and those other teams were distractions. That's what I think it was. I think that the killers were actually, like you're saying, were close up. They would have been close up. The cost was too high if they missed. I haven't discounted that a shot came from inside the car myself.
Yeah, you've said that before. I've struggled to get that one, to be fair. But again, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying that it's not a possibility, because it obviously is a possibility. But I'm not sure. I don't know. There's something about
I personally
that
think that Greer stopped the car, and the reason he stopped the car was so that the guy in the sewer could get the shot in. He stopped it right by the sewer. Yeah.
See, that for me, that opens up another issue. If the shot was fired inside the car, then the one person that they want to survive that is Jackie Kennedy, right?
Yeah.
Because she went on to be, quite a prominent figure and all the rest of it. Married one of the world's most wealthiest people in Aristotle Onassis. If they were going to do it from inside the car, I believe that they would have brought her as well, right?
Yeah, personally, I think the risk is too high on that. I'm not saying it did, but I just said I haven't discounted it. That's all. And I'm also bearing in mind the
I haven't.
Yeah, I'm also bearing in mind the Bobby Kennedy killing, where Sirhan was convicted for that, but the Thomas Noguchi, he said the shot actually came from under the car armpit. So Sirhan was the distraction, and actually the real shot came from close up. That's just what made me think it's possible. And the Zapruder film, Greer turning his head just at the same time as the headshot. I mean, there is that synchronicity as well.
I mean, I'm more inclined to think that the first shot that hits him from behind, where you then see him lurch forward and clutch his chest.
Yeah,
I'm more inclined to think that was the attempted assassination, right? I think that the actual fatal shot of taking his head off, this is just my own personal whatever, was either from the train going by, or a complete accident with one of the either the police or the Secret Service with a gun going off as they approached the car.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I've heard that.
Range.
Yeah, I've heard that about the Glenn Bennett machine gun. I can't remember the name of the gun, but yeah, I don't buy that one personally. But
again, it's another one I'm not discounting. But for me, I've always thought that the best way to do it would be on the moving train, and that train was moving at just the right time, which ties in with that whole 5-minute delay malarkey and all that stuff. It just too convenient for me. You got a gunman on that train that can take the front of the president's head out, and that was very, very much closer than what the book depository was. For me, that was like, well, that's perfect. You've got your instant getaway.
Yeah, again, I mean, the photo.
Nobody stopped that train, right?
Yeah, but I think that might be an optical illusion, that train, because I'm not convinced that there was a train going over. But again, you don't know what to trust in the visual imagery. So, yeah, personally, I think it was closer. But was that back wound? Was that the first shot? Because what about the throat? The one in the throat, wasn't that the first one, or the one in the back was the first one? Is that right?
Well, you say they talk about the one in the throat and the one in the back, right? I'm of the opinion that they are the same shot, right? I think the bullet came in through the back and exited through the throat. I don't think that was an entrance wound, right? Or vice versa. If they are saying that was an entrance wound, then that one in the back would have been an exit wound, right? One way or the other. I think it's the same. I think it's the same shot. I think if you could go back and do it, I reckon you could put a rod through one and it comes out the other, right? I reckon you could do that. But
But what about the hole? What about the hole? Do you think there was a hole in the windshield?
No, I don't. And I'll tell you what I don't. Photographs I've seen of the car outside the hospital, windshield's intact.
But there were witnesses who said they saw a hole in the windshield.
Yeah, but there's a lot of witnesses who said they saw somebody shooting from the Grassy Knoll, but we never prove it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We haven't got enough evidence to prove it. I mean, I'm not even saying that those photographs of the car outside the hospital is the actual car, you know. Yeah. But from what I've seen, that windshield is completely intact. I mean, there's no crazing, there's no line, there's nothing, you know. And there would be if there was a bullet hole in that window.
Yeah, people are adamant. A lot of people are adamant that there is a hole there, you know. So,
I've not seen it. I've not seen it at all in any of the pictures of the car after the event. I've not seen it. Also, the car is in the museum, isn't it, now as well?
Yeah, but it's not it was renovated, wasn't it? I mean, they basically destroyed the evidence.
Right. Yeah, of course they did. Yeah.
So,
but you know, if from my point of view, it would have taken a while to replace that windshield.
Yeah, but apparently the car was in I forget the name of the place, the big Ford plant. I can't remember the name of the place. Some guy said that the car was there on the Sunday, I think it was, and that they fixed they changed it. The car was sent away. Okay, so so we've discussed the locations. So now we need to think about the guns. So so where are you saying you think the shots were from? The depository or the Daltex? What are you saying?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think the whole Texas book depository thing is a complete distraction. I think it's a red herring. I don't think anything was fired from there at all, personally. I think all that was a setup. I think, you know, there was a gun, there was a window opened, there was a gun placed there. Whether Harvey Oswald was even on that same floor, I've no idea. No idea at all. It all just seems a little bit too convenient for me that, you know, even if you could argue that okay, the gun and everything was left in haste and he wanted to get out of the building quickly and all the rest of it. But, you know, how many? I'd be asking the question: how many guns did this guy own? Right. So I'd be going back. I would have been going back to the minute they'd arrested him. I'd have been like, let's get in his house. Let's see what he's got in there. Right. They didn't do that. What they did was they concocted some half-assed, you know, spliced together photograph of him holding a gun in his backyard. Right. Well, the gun in the picture it's not even the same gun that was used in the shooting. Apparently, right. It's not even the same type of gun. So I'm saying, well, how many guns did this guy own? I'd be going back to his apartment. I'd be searching it and trying to find any proof, any evidence whatsoever about what guns he owned, what guns may have still been back in his apartment, what guns he may have got licenses for, whether it was in the name of Lee Harvey Oswald or Alex Heidel or whatever it was that he called himself. You know, I would have been going through all of that, but that didn't happen. But the key thing for me is, you know, they're trying to sell us. Oh yeah, this is him holding that gun photograph. It's a different gun for a start. It's also a different gun from what was initially reported as well.
Yeah.
And I know things can get said in the heat of the moment and all the rest of it. But, you know, I think I can't remember what they called it initially. They said it was a Mannlicher to start with.
No, the first one reported the Mauser. And I think
Mauser, that's it. Yeah. So
in the radio transmissions, I think they said it was found on the 5th floor, not even on they found a Mauser on the 5th floor, I think they said. So but then came up with the Mannlicher, but
So again,
yeah, and Walter Cronkite, all the TV stations were saying it was a Mauser. They reported it. It was a Mauser that they'd found. Also,
yeah,
also the Mannlicher that they said that Oswald had ordered, it's 4 inches longer or shorter than the one that's in wherever it's kept. I don't know whether the one that they keep, where is it? I don't know, in some museum somewhere. It's actually not the same length. And Jesse Curry, when asked about the Mannlicher, he said, when he was asked whether he thought it was the murder weapon, he says, well, yes. And they asked him why, and he said, because the FBI told me. The FBI told him.
And again,
and they said it, the handwriting.
So you then got to be saying the bullets that they did find, you know, did they match the gun to the bullets or the bullets to the gun, right? There's a big difference. There's a huge difference, right? Because I said at the start, oh, it was a Mauser, right? They found a Mauser on whatever floor. When they did find a bullet or magic bullet or bullets, you know, if they found bullets, you know, did somebody get the instruction to go into the hospital and get in hand in the pocket and drop a load of bullets on the gurney, right? And if they do that, then somebody picks up the bullet, they pick up the magic bullet that was found in the car, right? All of that stuff. And then, oh, these bullets don't match a Mauser. We need to find a gun that matches these bullets. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you do? Do you match the gun to the bullets or the bullets to the gun? Either way, it was all half-assed. Everything half-assed.
Yeah, the other one I read, I don't know whether it's true, but I also read that there were actually one bullet was still in the case. So actually there were two shells and one bullet. So actually, I'm not sure whether that's true, but in the photos they said actually one bullet is still in the shell. So I don't know whether that's true.
The ones that were found in the warehouse, yeah?
In the depository, yeah, the three that I was talking about on the 6th floor.
Yeah. And as you say, you know, conveniently, three bullets conveniently on the floor of where he's supposed to fire the shots, you know, in a row kind of thing. Yeah. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but those bullets would, you know, when you do the whole bolt action, pull it back to do the second shot, it chucks out the shell, it chucks out the cartridge, it throws it out, and it doesn't just like it just fall out, right? It just doesn't fall out. It goes bloody miles when you shoot out of that gun.
I read
you know, and if he's hanging out of a window, right? He's hanging out of a window, right? And he goes, pulls it back, and the bullet goes, oh, I'm going to jump out and I'm going to go back into the book depository, right? And just sit in a row on the floor in a nice, neat little row. And when I do it for the third time, the next bullet is going to drop right next to the other casing. I'm sorry, but that's not happening. 9 times out of 10, I reckon even probably 10 times out of 10, those bullet casings are going out of that window onto the footway below, right? Possibly even hitting somebody on the head as they fall down, right? Just it's absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
Yeah. Okay, so as I said as well, Jim Garrison thought actually there was a .45 revolver, and the bullet. He thought that the bullet had ended up on the inside grass that I was telling you about, that the FBI Dallas #2 had picked up. So if that was picked up on the inside grass, then that might suggest if that it gone through Kennedy's head it must have been fired from the North Knoll, or from the north side. So again, that would support a shot. If it's a revolver, then it's close, and then that wouldn't support the driver or Kellerman shooting it. It would support somebody on the other side of the car, or the other side of Kennedy. And there was no one in the car on the other side of Kennedy, so then somebody close up on the other side of the car. Okay, so witnesses. There were a lot of witnesses there, although, as you were saying, not as many as you might have expected. Actually, the knoll was sparsely populated. Nothing like what they'd seen on Main Street. So, and when the Warren Commission were investigating the assassination, they didn't call all the witnesses. They just depended on the witnesses that gave them supported their view of what had happened, their predetermined view of what had happened. So do you think all the witnesses can be trusted, Jace, or do you think actually some of them were actors, or they were pressurized into saying things that they hadn't seen? What's your view on the witnesses?
I think in the heat of the moment, it is sometimes very difficult to recall exactly what happened, even though you've just seen it. I think, that is, I don't know if you've ever been involved in a road traffic accident or anything like that, and you've been asked to say, what happens. Your instant recall is not brilliant, right? So I think there would have been a lot of discrepancies. Having said that, there were a lot of testimonies that actually did match up, right? And all we know that those ones that matched up that didn't actually fall in line with what they were trying to say were discounted by the Warren Commission.
Yeah.
And they were discounted by the Warren Commission. They didn't match up with what they were trying to say, which was it was the 3 shots fired from the lone gunman, right? From the book depository.
Yeah.
That was the line they were trying to take. That was the line that was being sold to the public.
Yeah.
But when people were saying anything different, even if you had 30 people saying the same thing, which was different to that, they were discounted by the Warren Commission.
Yeah, that's because they'd already come to their verdict before they'd even started, or they convened the commission. They'd already come to the verdict. It was predetermined.
We also know that quite a few of those witnesses that actually, stuck to their guns and kept on saying the diversion. A lot of those met with untimely deaths and in very suspicious circumstances. We know that's fact.
They were intimidated, harassed. Yeah, some of them were murdered. A lot of them were murdered. Yeah. So, there was a lot of.
You got to ask the question why.
Yeah, I think even Ken O'Donnell, he was one of JFK's aides, closest aides. He said he thought that shots had come from the Grassy Knoll, and he was a World War II veteran. And he said the FBI pressurized him into supporting the official version. Yeah.
I mean, it's not just witnesses to the shooting either, is it? It's witnesses beyond. So you've got, when the body is taken into the hospital, those people that attended the body first, they're witnesses.
Yeah.
The medical staff that were initially looking at the president's wounds, body, whatever, before they were kicked out, they're witnesses. Now, interestingly, there is a documentary that's coming out in the next couple of days. I think it's all people in America. I think because I think it's being aired by National Geographic Channel. Yeah, but it's not come to England yet.
Yeah.
but it's in the next few days.
Yeah.
And they've managed to get the surgeons that attended,
Yeah.
or the ones that are still alive anyway,
Yeah, but
to actually speak on this documentary, and they're going to say what they saw. Right now, my question to that is, and again, I haven't seen the documentary yet, and I see it, to be honest. My question about that is, why has it taken 60 years?
Yeah.
For them to speak?
Yeah. Well, the Parkland staff were made to sign a statement, a declaration that they wouldn't say what they'd seen. It was I think it was called a national security statement or something. It was a matter of national security that they wouldn't speak, so they had to sign it.
So again, in the half-assed way they did everything, they got everybody in the hospital that saw anything to sign a statement to say they wouldn't say anything ever. All right. But yet, the actual crime scene, they let everybody just run off. Doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so let's take a look at the motorcade then. So did how the motorcade how it the order of the vehicles or the setup of the motorcade, did that influence the ability of the shooters to kill JFK, and was that facilitated? So you were talking about the footage from Love Field, I think, where you can see, I think it's Emery Roberts telling some of the Secret Service agents to get off the, what do they call them, the running boards or something at the side of JFK's limousine. And also the police officers on the motorbikes, they were told to sit back. So in previous motorcades, when he'd visited other cities, they were much tighter. So he was much less vulnerable when he visited other places. What are your thoughts on
I think the directive was that they needed the commander-in-chief to be completely visible and closer to the public, right? So that was why they were told to back off. It was also a very much minute decision to remove the roof of the car, right? And we know that there were two planes at Love Field. We know that there was Air Force One, and there was the cargo plane, which had backup limousine plus the roof of the Lincoln that Kennedy was riding in, right? That went protocol. That went against every other protocol that had gone previous of presidents riding in a motor vehicle, right? So you have to ask the question, well, why? Because what they could have done, they could have made him visible by putting a glass bubble on instead of just a normal roof, right? But no, they didn't do that either. He was fully exposed. And again, I keep going on about this roof of the car because I used to have a convertible car that actually had a roof that you could put on, put off. Yeah. You remember it, the Spitfire, right?
Yeah.
And even on a little Spitfire, that was actually a real ball ache of a job to get that roof on and off, right? And would take more than one person to do it. So that would have been a whole orchestrated exercise to get that done. Because when the limo did arrive at Love Field, it did have a roof on it. So that would have been a whole, orchestrated exercise to get that roof off and put back into the plane.
Yeah.
And then how did you get that roof to Parkland, to put it on the car at Parkland? Because it did go on at Parkland, right?
Yeah.
Before it went off to its final destination.
Yeah.
So again, slightly went off track a bit. You had two planes there. One was a cargo plane, one was Air Force One, right? So when they then took JFK by ambulance back to Love Field to get onto Air Force One, he didn't actually need to be on Air Force One because he was no longer the president of the United States, right? So they could have just put that casket in the cargo plane, without any modifications or altercations needed to Air Force One, which they then did in order to get the casket on the plane. So they modified the back of the plane to get the kit on. I mean, all of that is just absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Anyway, so going back to Motorcade, the car, they also drove at a much slower speed than what they would normally drive as well.
Yeah.
And in fact, they even slowed down from that speed.
Yeah, there were a lot of things different with the setup, the motorcade. So, firstly, there should have been a military aide sat in the middle, in the front. So I forget his name. Was it Godfrey McHugh? I think. I think he was. He was the military aide. So on the previous motorcades, there's like a military aide sat in the middle between the driver and the Secret Service agent in the passenger seat. So if, I'm not saying it was, although I suspect there was, if the military aide had been sat there in the middle of the front seat, then if there was a shot from the front, then he would have been in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have blinded. I suspect, I'm pretty sure he would have, or at least made it more difficult to fire or hit JFK from the front. So that's one thing. Also, Admiral Berkeley, his personal physician, should have been sat in the car with him. He was put back into a car at the rear of the motorcade. And also, usually the media truck was in front of the limousine. So it would have been directly in front of the limousine, and they would have been looking back and taking all the pictures. Actually, the media truck was way back. So because it was way back, they couldn't get any close-up shots of the shooting. If they'd been so if that did have anything to do with the shooting, those people and vehicles being moved, then that suggests that whoever it was wanted the front of the motorcade to be free to shoot at. Okay, and and further to that, then we got to look at who was in the motorcade. So if you see the footage, you think, well, there's JFK, he's at the front of the motorcade. Well, actually, no, he wasn't the lead. His limousine wasn't the lead vehicle. Actually, there was a pilot car, there was a lead car, and then there was some Dallas police officers in front. So I think in the I don't know how to say his name, Ike Altgens, you can see the lead car just in front of the limousine. So he was pretty close up, but you can't see the advanced motorcyclists. They're out of view. There was some advanced motorcyclists. And then way, it was already on, I think it was already on the Stemmons Highway. There was a pilot car. So, but actually, that should have been, I think I'm right in saying, that should have been right close up next to, they should all have been cluttered up right in front of the limousine. But the pilot car was actually miles up out of front. And Sam Holland, he was the railroad supervisor who Mark Lane interviewed, and who'd said he'd seen the smoke from behind the picket fence. And so he was watching the motorcade from the Triple Overpass, and he said that before the motorcade arrived, there were two police officers on the corner, on the north corner of the Triple Overpass, and they were checking all the IDs of the people who were arriving there. And Sam Holland, he said he knew everybody there, because I think they were meant to be just railroad stuff. And then when the pilot car arrived and went under them, then the police officers suddenly relaxed, and Sam Holland said there was a rush of people that arrived in the area, and the police officers weren't checking the IDs of these people, these late arrivals. So, and of course, after the pilot car, you have the Dallas motorcyclists, and you also have the lead car. In the lead car, you have Jesse Curry. Who else was in there with him? There were two Secret Service guys and two Dallas police officers. I can't remember. There was Jesse Curry, Forrest Sorrells, I think Winston Lawson, and I can't remember who the other Dallas police officer was. Was it Will Fritz? It could have been Will Fritz. So they were in the lead car, but obviously the police officers, if they were police officers, people in police uniform, didn't seem too concerned that that Jesse Curry might have seen them letting these guys onto the Triple Overpass. So then you've got to ask, well, so why might that have been? Well, who was in the pilot car? In the pilot car was, I think it was a Colonel Whitmire, and then Deputy Chief Lumpkin. He was Jesse Curry's deputy. Then there were some other police officers, and there was a guy called Jack Crichton or Jack Crichton. I don't know how to pronounce his name. And he'd set up a military unit. Was it the 488th military unit or something in the 50s? And he said that there were about 100 Dallas police officers who were in that military unit. So the Colonel Whitmire, he was the boss of the East Texas Army Reserve. And Lumpkin, who was the Jesse Curry's deputy, was driving that pilot car. He was in that reserve as well. But actually, he, in terms of security for the for things like presidential visits, he actually was had higher rank than Whitmire. And apparently it was Lumpkin or Whitmire who told Robert Jones at the 112th military unit in San Antonio or whatever to stand down. So you just wonder whether those police officers in that pilot car, the advanced motorcyclists, they actually were part of that Army Reserve and were actually on a mission.
Yeah, it's all a bit smelly, isn't it? But it was definitely, I mean, normal protocol was definitely not followed. It was definitely broken.
Yeah, because those police officers weren't acting normally like you would expect police officers to behave.
No, exactly. Well, maybe they weren't normal police officers.
Yeah. And as I said, I from that Orville Nix film, if it's true, there's a suggestion that shots came from from that north corner of the triple overpass. Okay, so is there anything else you wanted to say about that, Jason, on the motorcade?
No.
Okay, so now the body's at back at Love Field. Well, we think it's JFK's body, and it's on the way back to Bethesda. So we're going to have the shenanigans of the autopsy in the evening. So this just, I mean, what's been going on in Dallas, crazy. What goes on in the autopsy is just as crazy, if not crazier. So what do you know about the autopsy?
Not a great deal, actually. Yeah, all I do know is that the autopsy at Bethesda was performed by military personnel rather than
that's right,
just medical personnel.
Yeah.
And that as I said, you know, the autopsy photographs that we've seen that are available, none of them really match up with any of the statements or any of the even the footage, the footage of the actual, you know, shot to the head and everything. You know, you're not looking at the same head sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there were so apparently in the photos that the Warren Commission show, they showed photos from the left side. They showed from the left, the photos from the left. They didn't show photos from the right. And as we talked about before, even though photos were taken, they didn't use those photos. So they asked a guy, an illustrator, to make a sketch based on what they could recall. And then when that didn't tie in with the verdict that they'd already reached, Gerald Ford asked the illustrator to move the wounds. I think also in 1967, the Clark panel, they did the same with the head. They did the same with the head wounds. And
I think you can't put the wound there, which is ridiculous. And why are they even entertaining bloody drawings?
Yeah.
You know, it's not Victorian times where you do where all the newspapers had bloody no photographs. They had just drawings and sketches and things. It's not Victorian times. It's 1963, for crying out loud. But yeah, why are they even accepting that as evidence? Absolute nonsense. Absolute utter nonsense.
And I think the photography
thing about, you know, removing the brain is also evidence as well, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's public known that if you remove a brain that's had severe trauma straight away, it is pretty mush, right? Normal practice is, and has been prior to 1963, if somebody dies of a trauma to the brain, you remove the brain and then you freeze it for a week, right? And then you go and do your forensic examination, because the only way you can actually get a decent forensic examination on a brain is after it's been frozen for a week. And then you can cut it, you can look at, you know, fragment path, bullet entrance, exits, all the rest of it. Even if a brain has been sort of partly decimated, the remaining section that you freeze becomes it, and it will help you in that forensic, you know, this is where the fragment's gone, the angle that it's gone, all the rest of it. It helps, and that's why they do it. They freeze it for a week. They didn't do that with his brain. In fact, not only did they not freeze it, but they bloody lost it. They put it in a jar and lost it. Absolutely ridiculous, you know.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So they stick the brain in a jar and then they probably lose it. I mean, you lose a Post-it note. You don't lose a bloody brain, do you? It's like absolute bunch of clowns. You might as well have done the autopsy in McDonald's.
Yeah, I think
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
I think also the photographer, the official photographer, he was questioned by the Assassination Review Board in the late 90s. And he said, those are not the photos I took. So actually, the photos that were shown, they were not available in the official record, are not the photos that the official photographer took. Also, we should mention that the Dr. Humes, I think it was, he'd been serving with the Navy, I think it was, for 40 years, and he'd never done in 40 years a gunshot post-mortem. So here we have the President of the United States in a suspicious murder, and some guy who's never done a gunshot post-mortem is doing the post-mortem. And then
that's absolute, you know.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's just beyond belief, isn't it? It's absolutely beyond belief.
And he was under duress from superior officers who were telling him what to do and what not to do. And then, to compound that, at all his notes, he said he burnt his notes. That's a court-martial, surely, if ever there was one.
Well, you know, I think every single person that actually had anything to do with it in any capacity whatsoever should have all been court-martialed, to be honest. Starting with Lee Johnson, to be honest. But there we go.
Okay, so so we talked about Dallas police. I think their behavior, as far as I'm concerned, they were complicit. The FBI were complicit. The Secret Service were complicit. Military intelligence, their behavior was suspicious as well. But I think so JFK was murdered in Texas, so I think we need to ask who invited him to Texas. Like you were talking about earlier, Texas was they needed to win Texas, basically. So, and there was a lot of infighting within the Democratic Party. But I was reading a bit about this earlier. I'm not sure who invited him. Was it LBJ or John Connally? And then who organized the trip? There seems to be a lot of buck passing about, oh, well, a blame game going on. But, you know, I think that could be a lot of smoke screen and mirrors. I think they were probably all complicit. So I just wonder, I just wonder, when do you think this was conceived? Do you reckon it was just conceived a month or two earlier, or do you think it'd been in the pipeline a lot longer before?
What, the actual visit or the assassination?
Yeah, the visit. Well, basically the visit as the pretext for the assassination. Yeah. When do you think they thought it up? What do you think provoked it? Do you think? I think basically money and politics provoked it. He'd sacked. Who'd he sack? He'd sacked Alan Dulles. He'd sacked the head of the Secret Service as well. Lemnitzer, was he the Army Chief of Staff? Or I think he was the Army. Was he the Army or Navy Chief of Staff? He'd sent him off to NATO.
Oh yeah, he was definitely making himself unpopular.
Yeah.
You know, to the Western world, he might have been the darling blue-eyed boy, but actually he was a bit of a bastard, to be fair.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of how ruthless he was, in terms of, you know, what he wanted, where he wanted to get to, and that irrespective of whether the people that he sacked, like, you know, Dulles and all the rest of it, whether they were corrupt is neither nor there. The fact is that, you know, Kennedy came in and said, right, I'm not putting up with this anymore. It's going to be my way or the highway, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that that didn't endear him. That didn't endear himself to the powers that be. I mean, you have to remember that all of those kind of people, they would have been there, with the previous president, and they were actually around or back around when Johnson was there, so that they're always going to be there or thereabout. He was not. He was there for 4 years, and he would have to win another 4 years, which is what he was about to do. And they wanted to stop that. And I don't care what anybody says.
I think basically they were making lots and lots of money, and basically he was gonna be putting a brake on it. I think that's what it was. So that go
on.
They were just war. I mean, we've seen it recently in Ukraine and Gaza and all that stuff. What you don't hear about in the news.
War makes billions. Yeah, war makes billions. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. We've had it here with Iraq and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, but you don't hear about it in the news. They don't talk about, this company is making so many 100 million because of this contract and all that. You don't hear about it. So,
it's the same. It's the same with everything. It's the same with everything. And how many people have got rich out of COVID? All of that kind of stuff. It's like, it's all a big buy-in scheme. And if you don't buy into it, you're pay the price. You're absolutely going to pay the price.
Yeah.
And obviously, he'd appointed Bobby Kennedy as Attorney General.
Yeah,
we've also made him pretty open because Bobby Kennedy comes in and he wants to wipe out the mafia. He wants to wipe out organized crime. Jimmy Hoffa it was all related. Everything's all related to the Kennedys. Everything. Jimmy Hoffa he disappeared.
Yeah, Hoover.
Hoover as well.
Yeah, Hoover had said there was no mafia, and the Boffman, his name Bauman or Boffman, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He was the boss of the Secret Service. He'd said there was no mafia as well, and Kennedy got rid of them. So, okay, so
and again, ultimately, moving on from that, ultimately, Bobby Kennedy paid the price of actually, cleaning up the states where they're out of control. So
it'd be interesting to see how Bobby Kennedy's son gets on in these in the presidential elections. An American guy said to me he's got no.
You know how it's going to end up, mate. You absolutely know. We can call it right here and now. We can absolutely call it. Because Jack Kennedy's son was thinking about going into politics and dies in a mysterious plane crash. Right? It's like you know how it's going to end up. You absolutely know.
Yeah, I hope.
It's going well.
Well, I hope not. So,
well, right, but
Okay, so
and the thing is, it will happen. Right, it will happen, and it will happen again, and it will keep on happening. It will keep on happening, and every time it happens, nobody then goes and revisits the past and say, "Look, how many times has this happened now?" Right? And nobody then questions. They all say, "Oh yeah, isn't that unlucky?" The Kennedy curse strikes again.
Okay, so of course, JFK was murdered in Dallas, but there'd been threats before Dallas, been threats in Chicago and Tampa. So, and there were two suspects in both those places that had very similar profiles to Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald. So in Chicago, it was Thomas Valley. He'd been in the Marines. He just got a job in a building overlooking the street that the motorcade was going to go down. And then there was some other guy, Lopez Policano or something like that in Tampa. So, but anyway, apparently in Chicago, the FBI or the Secret Service had a tip-off that there was going to be an assassination attempt. And I don't know whether it's true, but the tip off came from somebody called Lee. and in Tampa they did, and so in Chicago they aborted the trip. I think, did they abort the trip? And then in Tampa
who did the tip off come from? Somebody called what?
Lee, Lee.
Oh, really? Brilliant.
And then
couldn't make it up, could you?
And then in Tampa they'd had a tip off as well, so they didn't abort the trip, but I think they changed. Instead of driving, they used a helicopter, I think, to transport JFK. So it's clear, I think it's clear that Lee Harvey Oswald worked for the CIA. He'd been in the CIA from the late 50s. And they also reckon he was an FBI informant. So I think there's a possibility that he tipped off the FBI in Chicago, and having seen that the trip had been aborted, I wonder whether, you know, that note that Hostie's supposed to have flushed down the toilet in Dallas, I just wonder whether he'd similarly tipped off the FBI in Dallas that there was going to be an assassination attempt there too, and had assumed, because they'd acted on the Chicago threat and Tampa threats, that they would do the same in Dallas. But of course, in Chicago, in Tampa, he wasn't working in Chicago, in Tampa, but he was working in Dallas. And if they didn't act on his tip-off in Dallas, there he was going to be working in the building with his, sticking out in the wind, looking an idiot. So do you think there's a, do you think he thought, because those previous threats had been stymied, that he thought the same thing was going to be happening in Dallas and got caught out?
I don't know. Never really thought about that aspect of it. I'm not even sure I even think that he was working for the CIA, to be honest. I don't know. I think he was a very mixed up guy, and he was involved in a lot of things. And I think he was quite easily led. I think you have to have a degree of, in order to be like an undercover CIA agent, I think you'd have to have a degree of intelligence. And I'm not sure he was that bright, to be honest. To be a double agent. I mean, he may well have been a double agent. I personally think, he was more of a doppelganger, as much as I am to think that when they've got an inside man, they've got a double agent, whatever. I think they have a replicant. So I think they make sure that they have somebody like, your basic average man in the street who can be, that thing that he was actually saying he was being, which was the patsy. I think they have somebody that if a double agent gets caught, there's always somebody that they can offer up instead of, so they then keep their double agent. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
that's what I think. I think he was just
I
think he was just
like a fall guy or a patsy, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. I think he was just a setup guy. I think he was an absolute setup guy, and I think he'd got involved with so many things that it was actually very difficult for him to get out of it, to be honest. I mean, like the whole Lafayette Square scenario when he was involved, Guy Bannister and all that kind of stuff, and he was dishing out propaganda leaflets and blah de blah.
Yeah,
I think he was very easily led, and he got into all of those situations that would formulate a construction to tie him into that. So he was always going to be the guy that had that pinned on him, no matter what.
So So on the day of the well, where do you think he was during the assassination? I think he was on the first floor at the doorway. Where do you think he was?
I think he was probably able to be at a certain place because something was going to happen that he needed to be there for. I don't think he was told what it was. I think he was, again, instructed that he needed to be somewhere. And being that easily led sort of guy, I think he was just like following orders, to be honest. And I think he was told to wait. I think he was to be in some place and just wait. And then I think he probably might even have been sitting in a window of the book depository and looking out at the whole motorcade and whatever. All of a sudden he realizes, oh shit, I really shouldn't be here, right? I think he just had that dawn of realization, which is why he got out of there as quick as he could. And I think that, he suddenly started putting two and two together, and then he went into a panic. And then I do think that he may have been the guy that shot Tippit in that fit of panic or whatever, because when, allegedly when they arrested him in the theatre, he did say this, apparently.
Yeah. I mean,
He was quoted as saying,
yeah, but I think, did he really say that, or did they make that up? I mean, so I don't think.
oh yeah, exactly.
I don't think. I think you got to take some of what the Dallas Police Department said with a large pinch of salt, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, undoubtedly. But if he did say that, then that would, indicate that he suddenly thinks, so shit, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time and I'm going to get fitted up here. Having said that, when we did see the footage of him when he's arrested, and he genuinely seems to think that he's unaware of the president that's just been shot.
Yeah, well,
right?
he hadn't been charged about the.
Yeah, sorry, I misquoted then. What I meant to say was he genuinely was not aware that he was being arrested for the assassination. I'm not saying he was unaware of the assassination, because the way he answered it actually gives that whole. He says, "I've not been charged of that as yet." All right. So it's like, yeah, it's almost like he was expecting to be, but hadn't been. Does that make sense? So
I think he also said that they didn't talk to him about the Kennedy assassination, and Will Fritz.
No, he said, mentioned.
And Will Fritz didn't have any notes.
Yeah.
I don't think he had any notes of and that's because I don't think he took any notes, because there were no notes. I don't think I suspect when they were questioning him, they weren't even talking about the Kennedy assassination. So I think they were probably telling people outside one thing and telling Oswald something completely different.
I mean, I think for me, the fact that he was in New Orleans, and he was involved with Dave Ferry and Ian Bannister in Lafayette Square. We all know the nonsense about that building on the corner, which was in two streets, but actually it was in the same place, right? Yeah. So he was definitely there, and as we know, New Orleans is like miles away from bloody Dallas, Texas, and yet he finds himself working in a building where the little shot is supposed to have come from. If he didn't pull the trigger, then you have to assume that he was somehow linked or involved with person or persons unknown that did pull the trigger, right?
Yeah, I think he
had some connection.
I think he had. Yeah, he definitely had. Whether he knew who it was, but I think he was in that milieu, so he knew. So whoever it was was fraternizing with him. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess it's just one of those things, isn't it? We're never going to know, because they're never going to release all of it. They won't ever release all of it. Even if they've released 99% of it now, if there's 1% held back, we will never know the absolute truth. And even then,
I think
even
there's
if they,
I think there's an assumption that everything is written down. I think the real meat just hasn't been written down. It's disappeared with the people who, all the people who've died. So, I don't think, like you say, we're ever really going to get to know everything.
yeah, but you have to ask the question. I mean, obviously Donald Trump, we all know how dodgy he is, right? But Donald Trump did say when he got into office that make sure that everything was released. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he
And
was
then
lying.
when it came to it,
He was lying,
and he
wasn't he?
and he looked at, well, yeah, but he looked at it all. He looked at it all, and then decided, actually, no, I can't. We can't release all. So if you got something like Donald Trump, who's like in the knowledge of what actually is being withheld, it does make you wonder what it is they are withholding, doesn't it? Because if there was nothing there, like you say, if there's nothing written down or no evidence or whatever, then what have they got to lose by releasing it all? Because they could release it all, and if there's nothing there, then we'd probably know none the wiser, would we?
Yeah.
But I think there is definitely something there that they are withholding, and they're withholding for an absolute reason, and that reason is that they don't want anybody to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, Oswald's a really strange character. I mean, he went to Russia, came back married to a Russian girl who was the daughter of a high-ranking Russian intelligence officer. So that's really bizarre. So, and then,
Oh yeah,
yeah, but then when he came back, so they didn't have a special file on him because I think they were called 201 files. So anybody that went to Russia had automatically had a file opened on them. Apparently there was no 201 file on him. And then when he came back, he went to work for 3 companies with which required high level intelligence clearance. So
yeah,
that's why I think he was definitely CIA, and he was probably FBI informant as well.
yeah.
But what his ultimate purpose was, I'm not absolutely sure, to be honest. But so anyway, I think part of the thing, people have conflated the Tippit murder with the Kennedy, and I think that was what they wanted. I mean, somebody on the Warren Commission apparently said that Oswald killed Tippit, therefore he killed Kennedy. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I think that's a correct quote. I might be wrong on that. So, but I think that's what the momentum that they wanted to build. So one of the great mysteries, I think, is how did Oswald get to the Texas theater? So, and what happened in that hour and so just a crazy period. So some people say he took a bus, but then you got Roger Craig, who was a deputy sheriff. He swore that he saw Oswald run down the Knoll after the murder, after the assassination, and get into a Rambler. So this brings in the consideration that you'd talked to, or emailed me about a while back, possibility that there were actually two Oswalds, or could they have been twin brothers or something? So because Marguerite, his mother, although there are some doubts actually whether she was really his mother. So in one interview with somebody, when they talked, they said, "Oh, Lee Harvey Oswald," and she said Harvey Lee Oswald. So that would have been a good one, if there'd been a Lee Harvey Oswald and a Harvey Lee Oswald. And you look at some of those photos and you think they're not the same person. They're not the same person.
Well, and this is what I've said all along. There are too many variables about his naming convention. because I'm quite hot on naming conventions. Even if people sort of say get it wrong in a report, whatever, these are reports about a homicide at the end of the day, so you don't get it wrong, right?
Yeah.
But even those initial reports, they were calling him by the wrong name.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
but
yeah,
you say, was Lee Harvey Oswald his real name? And also that, that thing what we've spoken to before, I've spoken to you before about, when you've got a triple barreled name, it's easier to remember for the public.
Yeah.
John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah. And so how did they get on to the search for Lee Harvey Oswald? That's the thing. So Roy Truly, Roy Truly, he worked in the Texas School Book Depository. He told Lumpkin, that guy I'd been telling you about, who'd been driving the pilot car and worked for the Army Reserve. Apparently, Truly told Lumpkin that Oswald was missing. But apparently Oswald wasn't the only one missing. There were other people who weren't there as well. So
yeah,
I mean, how would they, why would he be a suspect for the murder? I mean, they were desperate. Yeah. I mean, why would you think Oswald had murdered JFK? I mean, what evidence did they have? So anyway,
well, the evidence.
Yeah, there's no evidence. Jesse Curry admitted years later they didn't have anything on Oswald. So anyway, we don't know how he got to his lodgings, and then apparently there's a toot on the horn from a police car. So who's in that police car? Is it Tippit, or is it a guy called William Westbrook and Kenneth Cloy? These are two guys. William Westbrook would end up working for the CIA in Saigon a few years later, and they reckon he was a CIA liaison guy at the Dallas Police Department. But there's a possibility that Cloy and Westbrook had gotten on a bus, expecting Oswald to be on the bus, but he wasn't on the bus. So I just wonder whether something had gone wrong. I think something went wrong in the assassination plan. Possibly they'd wanted to kill JFK with one of the earlier shots. I think Oswald was meant to be already dead, and that he, like you were saying, he'd got wind, something was wrong.
Yeah.
And
panicked.
Like you say, maybe he'd been told to meet somebody at the Texas Theater. He'd panicked or something. Yeah, quite rightly. I mean, you would panic, wouldn't you? So, yeah, I think something went wrong with the shooting or something, or with the Oswald part of the plan. And then, of course, Tippit gets murdered. But there was a police car down the alley of by the murder scene, and in no time at all, as soon as Tippit was killed, that police car arrived. It was first on the scene, and there were 4 bullets in the Tippit body. 3 of them were was it Remingtons, or 3 Winchesters and 1 Remington? So actually there were 2 types of bullets used.
The different guns, basically.
Yeah, so 2 guns. And
wasn't one of them his own gun? Wasn't one his own gun as well? Did I misread that somewhere?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it could be right. And
it wasn't the insinuation that Oswald used his own gun twice and then picked up Tippit's gun and shot him with his own gun?
Really? Okay.
I thought I read that some. I thought I read them.
But then we come to the witnesses. Apparently, only 2 witnesses saw the murder. One was Helen Markham, who was inconsistent, and we talked about the lineup at the police department. And the other one was Domingo Benavides, who at the beginning wouldn't identify Oswald, but then his brother was shot in the head. And
who was shot in the head?
The brother of Domingo Benavides, who, and apparently his brother looked very similar to him. So Domingo Benavides was convinced they were trying to kill him because he refused to say it was Oswald. And then and also Warren Reynolds, he didn't see it, but he saw a guy run away. And again, he was similar. He'd initially refused to identify Oswald. And again, was it he actually himself was violently attacked. He was he shot in the head, but he fully recovered. And then he was called to the Warren Commission, and then he said, yeah, it was Oswald. But Domingo Benavides' brother was attacked again and killed. And Domingo Benavides' father-in-law set up his own investigation. And when the father-in-law set up his investigation, he himself was attacked as well. So there was a load of harassment, intimidation going on. And also, Jack Ruby just lived a few blocks from the murder scene, the Tippit murder scene. And also, Tippit had been seen waiting at a shop outside, which was a bus stop where the bus that they thought Oswald would have taken stopped. So, there's a possibility that he was waiting for Oswald to get off the bus at that bus stop.
Yeah.
There's all that crap.
Well, I mean, whichever way you slice it, for me, like I said, Dealey Plaza was crawling with literally every available law enforcement officer from Dallas, right?
Yeah.
Crawling with it. And yet within bloody 2 hours, they've all descended upon this theatre within minutes of Oswald being in there.
Yeah.
It just
makes
no sense, really.
Some people reckon actually he was already at the theatre before the Tippit murder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, then you've got to take into account that witnesses were being harassed. For example, the Victoria Adams, who I think was one of the office ladies in the book depository. No, was she? Who was the lady who saw a gunman on the Knoll on the morning of the shooting? And
that was her, wasn't it?
Was that Victoria Adams?
I think so, yeah.
So she said she was visited by Jim Lavelle. Jim Lavelle was the guy who was holding Oswald when Oswald was killed. So, and Victoria Adams said that he visited her.
Would she be visited by him?
He visited her and came out with some cock and bull stories saying that he'd lost her original statement and that she make another statement. Yeah. So there was all this kind of intimidation going on. And I talked about Helen Markham and Warren Reynolds, Domingo Benavides, but Helen Markham was called by the Warren Commission, but Aquila Clements, she was a black lady. She said she witnessed the murder too, but they never called her. Mark Lane interviewed her, and she said there were 2 men. There were 2 men, a small, chunky guy and a tall, thin guy. And the tall, thin guy had army fatigues, which is a common thing. For example, the guy who had the epileptic fit in Dealey Plaza had also been wearing army fatigues. So, but she was never called. And she said she again was visited by someone claiming to be a police officer, and he was telling her that if she didn't withdraw her statement, that she might get hurt. So there was all this stuff going on. As we know, there were a lot of people killed as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's think about tying this up, Jace. So what do you think happened overall? What do you think's behind all this?
I just think that from the minute Kennedy got in office, the powers that be formulated plans to get him removed, and I think it was just a playoff of one side against the other, because obviously Kennedy was gathering a bit of momentum. You had all the Bay of Pigs scenario, you had Vietnam, you had his outlandish statement to put men on the moon by the end of the decade, and all the rest of it. He was gathering momentum, and he was also building a little, I suppose, army, for want of a better term, around him. And I think the establishment didn't like it, and I think they needed him out, and they needed him out. They could not run the risk of him getting a second term. They just could not run that risk, because he was dramatically and drastically changing everything that America had kind of geared itself towards. I mean, he was getting rid of things like the Ku Klux Klan. He was civil rights. Was all he was just absolutely doing everything they didn't want. In terms of an establishment that had been, for want of a better term, above the law up until that point. And
yeah,
I think pretty much what they.
Yeah, you knocked the nail on the head there. I think these people thought they were above the law.
Yeah. And whether Kennedy was manipulated into position by Joe Kennedy and so forth is irrelevant. When you look at the reasons why they wanted him removed, whether he won it fair and square or not, again, is neither here nor there. The fact is, he was in. He'd done 3 years, and in those 3 years, done an awful lot of stuff that went against what a lot of people wanted, or were even trying to work towards. Perhaps is probably a better way of doing it. So I think the plan was in place more or less from day one. I think, personally, I think they considered Kennedy to be dangerous to what they wanted rather than anything else. I mean, he was very, very popular with the public and all the rest of it. And again, up to a point, Kennedy was no angel. I mean,
no.
You look at all the Marilyn Monroe stuff and all the rest of it. He was more of one of those sort of people that, again, himself was probably untouchable in terms of he could more or less do pretty much what he wanted. They wanted to be up to it, and I think that's exactly what they did. And there were too many powerful organisations that all wanted the same thing, which was him out of the way. And I think they all worked with each other, I think, to make sure that happened.
Yeah.
When I say power, thanks, lad. Cheers. When I say power, I mean power that you laughing at.
You're probably thinking, God, how long have we been talking?
Sarah's working. She don't mind me doing this. When I say power, you're talking like organisations like like the mafia, that probably more powerful than you and I could ever possibly imagine. And it all boils down to to multi-million dollars of motivation at the end of the crime syndicates and all the rest of it, of which Jack Ruby was very much involved with as well. And I just think that that's what it was. I think it was a formulated plan to get rid of him, and I think that obviously they achieved what they're out to achieve in terms of then covering it up, just make it as messy and as complicated, and just do everything as like you say, smoker as possible, to throw people off the scent, to lose evidence, to misplace evidence, to fabricate evidence, to fabricate statements, to lose genuine statements, to do everything that
because they have
would
they have absolute power. That's why media, government. I mean, there's no real accountability.
No, and I think what's become apparent from every president followed Kennedy, they've been nothing more than figureheads and puppets. I mean, if you look at Joe Biden at the moment, that guy, I'm probably going to get arrested by the FBI for saying this myself, but that guy is just a puppet. He is just a puppet. And even Trump, up to a point, I know Trump was really controversial and everything, but none of those guys that follow Kennedy would ever make a decision, and I'll include even Obama in that. They would never make a decision without being told what to say or what to do. They are just puppets, whereas Kennedy was much more of he had his own ideas and thoughts, and he wanted to put things into practice and into place. I guess you could argue that Obama did that to an extent, but even he was, they're all under the constraints of the administration and the party and the CIA and the FBI, and even today, even probably the mob still have got some kind of influence, although they're not as powerful as they used to be, I guess.
Not as visible.
So visible, probably is the word. Visible. So they're still controlled. They're controlled, and if they don't toe the establishment line, then they're gone. They are gone. And I think probably more so since Kennedy, all the presidents that have followed since. I mean, classic example is Nixon. He didn't toe the line, so out he goes, and the whole Watergate up in his face because they allowed that to happen, right? They allowed that to happen so that they could get rid of Nixon, because he wasn't conforming to what they wanted him to conform to, right?
Do you think there was anything? Do you think there was any JFK assassination in Watergate, or complete nothing to do with it? What do you reckon?
Oh, undoubtedly, absolutely, and I've got no doubt in my mind that there would have been. Absolutely no doubt in my mind. And again, the whole Clinton and Lewinsky scenario. Yeah, okay, Clinton was stupid and all the rest of it, but was she there? Was she put in place to bring him down? Yeah, absolutely, she was. All right, no question about it. And American politics, it's bigger probably than other politics, but it's no more corrupt on a pro rata basis than our own politics in the UK and in Russia and in France and in Germany and everywhere else. Basically, you get people in charge that they have to toe the establishment line, and if they don't, then they got rid of. I mean, look how many prime ministers we've lost in the last couple of years. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you don't do what the establishment needs you to do, then you're gone, and that was the way they did it. But I think in terms of selling that lie to the public, well, the list is as long as my arm of instances where the public get told one thing, but actually what actually happened is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
The difference between now and 1963 is, in 1963 you could tell the public anything, or the media could tell the public anything, and they believe it, right? They would believe it. Whereas now, you don't have to rely on the media. You've got everything. You've got everything at your fingertips, right? You've got it right here. You've only got to get on your phone.
Yeah.
Go on the internet, find out whatever you want, whenever you want. You've got everybody now is a journalist. Everybody's a journalist, right? Yeah. So you've got your phone in your hand, and you're at an event, or you're at a scene, you're at a crime, you're at whatever. You can record it. You can film it. Yeah. You can then put it back in your pocket. Nobody's going to subpoena it. Nobody will say, right, hand them over, right? You can then go on the internet, on TikTok or whatever. You can put it out there. The whole world can see it within seconds, within minutes. So everybody now needs that whole fuel of needing to know, needing to see, need to know, need to see. And if anybody comes out with anything that's a little bit, well, that's not quite right, people are on it. They're on it like a ton of bricks, absolute ton of bricks. And people make their own judgments. People make their own minds up. People put their own theory out there. And there's so much of the world now is controlled by not social media, but our own media, right? Us as people. And we demand the truth. We always demand the truth at the end of the day. But you will also get people out there that avoid the truth, right? And will just fabricate everything and beyond to protect themselves. And that's exactly what happened with the Kennedy assassination. The difference is they didn't have people with the resources to actually, I mean, like you said earlier, like was it 1975 before the Zapruder film was even shown to the public?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like, what, how many years? 12 years, was it? 12 years after the assassination? Before they even saw that? So before anybody could even question the direction of the bullets, 12 years, right? Because up to that point, the direction of the bullets was exactly how the Warren Commission said they happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you made a valid point about he was doing things that people who'd not been used to being told what to do, he was doing things that was polar opposite of what they wanted to do. I think also, some of the individuals, people like Alan Dulles, I don't know, I never met him, but my sense is that those kind of characters, they had huge egos. They were used to doing what they wanted to do. I also wonder, whether I think Eisenhower must have known that the assassination was going to take place. And they say, that even though Dulles was nominally sacked, actually he was still operating.
Rolling.
He was still, he was still had a shadow role from his home in the CIA, and that on the weekend of the assassination, he'd actually gone to a CIA station, not Langley. Langley, the CIA. There's another place, they called it the Farm or something, Camp Pier, I can't remember. He'd been there on the weekend of the assassination. So, and I think some of the reasons are pretty straightforward. Basically, not going in the direction that they wanted to go, and underlying that is money. I think they were just people who were making wads and wads of money, and he was going to be putting a stop to it. So I think that was a lot to do with things like the oil. The oil barons in Texas, they'd invested a lot of money in the defense industry. People like David Byrd, he was the guy who owned the Texas School Book Depository. He was an oil tycoon in Texas, and he'd in November 1963, he just bought a load of shares in Ling Temco Vought, which was like one of the biggest defense contractors. I think Johnson and Ladybird, they had big investments in General Dynamics. So I think they were all banking on the USA going to Vietnam, basically. And they were going to make a lot of money, and they did make a lot of money. And they didn't care about how many people died. And unfortunately, I think that's similar to what's going on in Ukraine and Gaza now. Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Did you want to say anything else?
No, I think if we're going to wrap up, I think we just probably sort of reflect on, where we are in terms of, like, 60 years later, 60 years today, it's like, where have we gone? How far forward have we come? I don't think we've come that far forward, to be honest, in terms of finding out the truth. But to anybody, to a young kid watching this or hearing this, I would say that the truth is always paramount. You may spend your whole life trying to find the truth, and the truth of this may never come out until long after we've shuffled off this mortal coil. But I think it's important. I think it's important to get to the bottom of it, because without the truth, then what's the point of it, really? It's like, you have to be able to trust. You have to be able to trust those that lead you. And if you can't trust those that lead you, then what is the actual point of anything, to be fair?
Yeah, I mean, but I think, people have kept it alive. So I think the topic is still alive. And if you give up, then the others, the murderers, the liars,
Yeah.
So even if you never can get to the ultimate truth, I think you've got to keep going on. Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think the one thing that we are agreed on, and that is, it's not in any doubt, is that the thing that isn't alive today is John F. Kennedy. Not that he probably would have been alive still, but if he had not died 60 years ago today, then the whole world would have been different. There's no denial on that. And I know a lot of it is all hypothetical, but would we have had as many conflicts as what we've had since the day he was assassinated? Would we have had America? Would we have had America going into various different wars? Would even Vietnam have happened? Probably not.
Yeah, as you say, I don't think he wasn't an angel. I mean, he had his dark
as
well, but there are also big departures in some of his policies from all the other characters you were talking about. Yeah. Okay.
But I know it's kind of sort of like I said, it all sort of conjecture and what ifs and buts and maybes and all the rest of it. But I'm pretty sure had he lived, there would have been no Vietnam, there would have been no Iranian war, there would have been no Iraqi war, there would have been probably not even an Afghanistan war, and all of these things that would have led to, like 9/11. 9/11 probably wouldn't have happened. Other things would have happened undoubtedly, because that's what happens in history. Things happen, right? But I think we would have had a completely different world had he been able to continue in office and had another term in office. I think America would have changed drastically. Maybe you wouldn't even get the ridiculous, nonsensical shootings in schools and everything that you get now, and all the rest. Gun laws may have changed, all that kind of stuff. It would have been different. And I think what is undeniable is that guy lost his life that day, and whoever pulled the trigger, however many people pulled the trigger, is always going to be a matter of argument, conjecture, and everything else. But the bottom line is, somebody pulled the trigger, and it should never have been allowed to happen in the first place.
Yeah, and so, I don't think it was Lee Harvey Oswald.
No.
Okay, let's finish there then, Jace. Until the next time then. Cheers.
Okay.